Welcome to Alpha505, Alpha Anywhere Alpha Cloud Masterclass. In this course, you're going to learn how to leverage the Alpha Cloud deployment environment to make your life easier and simpler. Alpha Cloud brings a brand new world of capabilities to dramatically simplify your life as an Alpha Anywhere developer. It makes it faster and easier to deploy your Alpha Anywhere applications. It also introduces a large number of developer operations, or DevOps, capabilities that dramatically enhance your productivity as an Alpha Anywhere developer. In this masterclass, we'll be covering the following topics: how to set up and deploy your Alpha Anywhere applications to Alpha Cloud, Alpha Cloud's unique features and capabilities that give you industrial strength deployment capabilities, using the built-in rollback system with your deployments, setting up scheduled deployments for automatic application deployment, setting up dev, QA, and production deployments to help automate your deployment process, managing security for your applications that are deployed to Alpha Cloud, using the built-in test database features provided with Alpha Cloud, leveraging third-party tools to manage your test databases, how to use the Alpha Cloud application settings to handle common multi-site application development situations. By the end of this course, you will be able to leverage the Alpha Cloud system to make deploying your Alpha Anywhere applications to the cloud simpler and faster. You will also know how to leverage the built-in developer operations features to dramatically simplify your life. Welcome to the Alpha Anywhere Alpha Cloud training class, Alpha505. Wanted to spend a few minutes on the history and background of Alpha Cloud to explain why Alpha Cloud is a powerful solution that you should look at for deploying your applications. So the goal of this overall course is to provide you both the knowledge and skills to be able to manage and deploy things to Alpha Cloud. And we're going to walk you through step by step every element of the way so that you're going to feel comfortable not only doing your first initial publishing and deploy, but also how to manage the cloud and make adjustments and use all the power that's built into the cloud. And there's a lot of concepts that go with it that are really neat and really make your life a lot easier. And we're going to be covering all those in this course. So for this course, I'm going to go over a little bit of history, talk about what the Alpha Cloud is, some of the benefits and the architecture before we dive into the actual hands-on training. I really want to make sure you have a good sort of high-level picture of how the system works. So what are some of the benefits of Alpha Cloud? Well, there are a lot of different benefits, and I'm going to walk through each of these really quickly. First, Alpha Cloud, you don't have to worry about setting up servers or anything. It's an on-demand system, meaning once you have your subscription, you can immediately start leveraging Alpha Cloud the next moment. It doesn't take any other elements. You can take your existing applications and start migrating them there, or build a new application and push it right to the cloud. You're going to have lower maintenance because you don't have to worry about servers and managing server scenarios, environments, and if you're growing, you need more capacity. You don't have to think about any of that. Built into it is also a high level of redundancy. Alpha Cloud actually works on top of an incredible environment, and more importantly is when you spin up your applications, it actually spins up a pair of servers so that you will have redundancy built into your application so you can have high availability. Now the cool thing, and these are kind of tied together, is the flexibility in the multiple websites. There's an enormous amount of flexible capabilities, meaning that because of the way Alpha Cloud works, you can deploy multiple websites for your application. You could deploy them with different parameters and properties, and there's just lots of ways to use the system. You don't have to go through a whole lot of configuration stuff to get to where you need to be from what you want to do with your applications. Alpha Cloud has very high levels of security, both the platform itself, but also leveraging the Alpha security environment. Elasticity, I kind of mentioned it, but that's one of the cool things about it is that you have the ability to grow your site dynamically. So let's say you all of a sudden are getting a lot of demand for your service and you have to increase the amount of cloud capability or the amount of availability for your application. Well, with Alpha Cloud, you can have that automatically take place. So you don't have to go out and get another server and set it up and configure it and do all that. Alpha Cloud does that for you. It's really, really nice. And then there's a high level of automation built into Alpha Cloud. Things like rollbacks and scheduling deployments and other things that allow you to take advantage of making your life easier. Essentially, the DevOps part of your life is going to become much, much simpler than the current environment from there. Now, the number one benefit, and I can't stress this enough, is that instead of you spending your time setting up servers and configuring it and adjusting it and taking care of all of that goes away. So you can focus on building. You will focus on creating and deploying your incredible applications, making them awesome, reacting to the marketplace, creating new features, etc. So now you'll be able to take all those hours that are spent on really just administrivia and focus that on your application. It's very exciting and very fun. Now, I want to go over a few slides on what the architecture of Alpha Cloud looks like. So Alpha Cloud currently is built on top of AWS, and that's our current platform, although it is architected to be able to work on other cloud platforms. There's something called the Alpha Cloud management layer. It's something you're going to interact with, but you're never really going to see because it's taken care of through point and click type screens. But what happens is that we have a whole layer of capabilities that is built on top of it to automate all of these things we need to do. Now, what happens is when you deploy, it's going to actually spin up 2 different IaaS servers on Alpha Cloud. And this is powerful for redundancies, for high capacity. It's all set up from the get-go. And then on top of that is where you'll actually deploy your items. So the reality is the top level where you have the deployments, that's where you're going to focus your time. Everything below that is all handled by Alpha Cloud. But you do have the ability to modify how Alpha Cloud does. You can set parameters, you can set policies, you can do all that within the console, within Alpha Anywhere, managing that. But the important thing also is that you can deploy as many types of applications, variations as you want with different aspects of Alpha, meaning you can use different versions of Alpha at the same time. So let's say you're doing some testing. Well, you could have your production deployment, and then you could create a whole other deployment with your application using a newer version of Alpha. It doesn't touch your existing, so you're safe, and allows you to experiment and have a lot of fun with there. And it all works on the same platform. Very, very handy. Now, this I mentioned before is, let's say what happens is your application blows up, starts to get a lot of demand. Well, the Alpha Cloud management layer can automatically spin up and spin down instances of servers to help your environment and make sure you can meet the demands of your application and your users. Now, the important thing is you have control over this. You can tell it when it can do this, so you don't have to worry about, surprise billing and things along those lines there. Also important, you can say, hey, spin them back down. So let's say you have a situation where certain times of the year, things are really, really busy, like a back to school season or something like that. But then after that, it gets really to a lower level of demand. Well, the neat thing is Alpha Cloud can handle that all for you. So it can spin them up when it needs it, spin them down when they're not, and thus maintain the most optimal economic scenario for you and your applications. So again, Alpha Cloud is going to spin up 2 server instances. That management layer manages everything for you. Management consoles make your life easier. All of these things are on point and click. You have full control of it, but you don't have to worry about coding and scripting and other things you may have. And Alpha Cloud has developed a full API that will be released in the future, where if you want to get pretty fancy, you can use that. And that will be really handy when people start using Alpha Cloud with continuous integration kind of methodologies, because you can automate some of the things you would normally do through a point and click environment. Before we dive into our training, I'm going to take a few moments here to show you what content we're going to be using for the training. And in our case, we're going to have 3 specific areas we're going to focus on. So first, we're going to have a very simple one-page HTML site. This site is super simple, and really we're focusing just on the mechanisms of how to use and set up and publish to the Alpha Cloud environment. So not a lot of capabilities built into it, but something very simple for us to demonstrate those key concepts. Then we're going to do another demonstration where we're going to actually have a multi-page site that has security. And this is very important because this will allow us to open up and show you exactly how to manage the security aspects when you use Alpha Cloud. And last but not least, we're also going to demonstrate how to build and deploy a web API or web service and use Alpha Cloud as a web service provider, which is a very powerful way for you to deliver very powerful capabilities by using the Alpha Cloud environment. So this is the first one-page HTML. As you can see, it's literally a single page. And on here we have some text and a graphic, etc. And so we'll use this page to do a deployment to Alpha Cloud, and then we'll show you the process in which you can make changes to this page, re-upload that, roll back, etc. And this will allow us to really focus on the mechanics of working with Alpha Cloud. But then we're going to move and we're going to use a next project. So the next project we're going to focus on is a secure project. This is an Alpha Anywhere project that actually has security enabled. So I can actually now use the built-in, there we go, and we'll demonstrate how we can manage security information. And you'll see it's really an extension on the basic capabilities, but there's a few nuances that you need to understand in terms of when you're deploying to Alpha Cloud. But we'll use this to kind of walk you through that process and make sure you're comfortable with it. Last but not least is we're going to be able to create a web API or a web service and deploy that. Now in this case, I'm going to demonstrate this not in the browser, but in a tool called Postman, which is a free tool that allows you to exercise web APIs. So you'll notice I have this Alpha505 collection here, and I have a single post request. This is a specific request that I can send against Alpha Cloud to get some data. And you'll notice here that I'm actually calling my Alpha Sports service and a specific API endpoint. The reason this URL, this is a environment variable. Basically, it tells you where the actual endpoint is. And we'll walk through this in more detail here. But the important thing is I can now have a web endpoint here. Here's my body, which is what I send to the API. In this case, I'm sending a request for product data, and we're going to go ahead and submit that. So I'll go ahead and do page number 1, and I'll click send. When I do this, it's actually calling Alpha Cloud, executing some code, and then returning a set of JSON to me. So you can see here it's returning a set of products that I've requested. Now let's go ahead and change this to 3, hit send, and you'll notice in this case, it's returning a different set of products. And a very simple one. This is actually auto-generated through a process inside Alpha, but we're going to use this API and we're going to deploy it to the server to show you how, if you just want to use Alpha Cloud as an API service, it's a great way to do it, and it works really well. It's very efficient and very, very quick and powerful. So those are the 3 demonstrations / content we'll be working through this program, and we'll get right into it. So our first step is to install the training files that come with the system. So you will have received a zip file, and that zip file will be Alpha505. Go ahead and download that and place it on your desktop or wherever you would like to locate it. Once it's downloaded, you can right-click on the zip file and use the Extract All. This will actually extract all the files. So I'm going to browse, and I'm going to put that on my desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and click Extract. This will take a few moments, and now we will have our file folder here. Next step is to go ahead and open up your file browser. And then what I'd like you to do is go ahead and go to your Documents and your Alpha Anywhere V12 folder. And yours may be named slightly different, but this is where you store all of your workspaces. So go ahead and open that up, and then drag or copy that or move it into that folder. So now we have that moved into our folder, so we have in a location. You can now go ahead and store this zip file somewhere else. And now we're actually able to go into our project. Now that you have it in our file location, we can go ahead and open Alpha5. So go ahead and click and start Alpha5 either from the desktop icon or from your start menu. Make sure that you start it in administrative mode and click yes. This will take you to your workspace and task table. You can go ahead and click here for Open an Existing Workspace and then click OK. Now what I'd like you to do is this will open up the Open Workspace dialog. Go ahead and go to Documents, Alpha Anywhere V12, to that Alpha505 folder and locate the Alpha505 ADB or document. Go ahead and click Open. At this point, we have now opened and you are in your workspace. You may see this control panel. If you do, go ahead and just make sure to click and be at the Web Projects Control panel. Now that we have our file installed, I want to go ahead and walk through a few of the little things just to show you how it's structured. This will set the groundwork for our later training. First, I'd like you to go ahead and make sure you're in the Web Projects Control panel and go to Tools, Alpha DAO Connection Strings. And you'll see we have a connection string. Now I've gone ahead and already supplied you access to a database that I have running on my server. And the reason why is I want to make it easy for you to be able to connect to this data in terms of both locally on your machine and in the cloud. So you don't actually have to modify this. Now if you do, you can go ahead and use our Alpha Sports database and copy it to where you want. But in our case, we don't need to make any changes to this in our training. So go ahead and close the Alpha DAO connection strings. Now the other important thing I want to highlight is there is in fact 3 separate projects in our workspace. So what we launched here was the workspace, and that allows me to break it into 3 or multiple projects. And in my case, I've broken it into 3 separate projects. And to access the projects, you use this drop-down menu on the left-hand side of the screen. And really all the project is a set of files that allow you to kind of break it into smaller chunks. So for instance, let's say you were doing a desktop web, you would have that in one project, and then you'd have maybe mobile in another project. But it's just a convenient way to kind of manage files and keep them under control. So in our case, we have 3 of them. Default, which is our very first training exercises. Second one, which focuses on security. And the last one, which is focusing on our web service API calls. So if I go to default, you'll see we really only have a single index page. And that's just to kind of show us the mechanics of getting things out onto the Alpha Cloud. Our security has a few other things. It includes some web components, it includes some A5 debut pages, and it's basically a small reference app for using security. The last one is web service, and in here there's not a whole lot other than we have our XBasic class, we have our web services class, and we have some other things such as the API test page. Now we'll go into each of these in detail, so go ahead and make sure you select default, and that's where we're going to start at the next step of our training. So for the first part of a training, we're really just going to focus on the mechanics of getting our files from our development environment up onto Alpha Cloud and how that process works and some of the nuances associated with it. To do that, we're going to use a very simple project as we showed earlier. It's really just a single HTML page, and we've called that index. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that, and we'll just go in and show you what it looks like. So as you can see, it's very straightforward. Has just a title, a built-in image, and also some text down here. Now, you'll see in our project, if I go down here, we actually have the image file here. So it's important when you have multiple files, the publishing process is going to collect all that and put it at the right location on Alpha Cloud. All right, so now our first step is to basically log into Alpha Cloud. And to do so, we use the drop-down menu on our mini toolbar here, which has a little cloud icon, and all of your Alpha Cloud items are accessible from within that drop-down menu. So anytime you need to connect to Alpha Cloud and look at a different element, you will use that Alpha Cloud menu. Now, in order to access the items, you actually have to have logged into Alpha Cloud. So the first thing I'd like you to do is go to Settings and Preferences. This will open up our Alpha Cloud preferences, and you'll have received your subscription information. This is going to be initially your subscription password and username and password. So you can go ahead and type in your credentials. And once you've typed that in, click Verify Credentials. In a few moments, you will see then this information become live. Now, if your credentials are not correct, let me go ahead and show you that. You will get a notice saying either your username or password was not found. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my password. And again, you'll see here. Now, I have multiple subscriptions because I do a lot of work on different projects. And that's one of the cool things is I can connect to different Alpha Cloud instances and do that from there. But for our purposes, I'm going to use my Giant Killer subscription. Now, you'll notice there's also account. Now, by the way, your subscription will probably default to if you only have one, to the one you have. But in my case, I have multiple, and that's why you see multiple there. And also, we'll talk about counts later on. They're really nice mechanisms for, especially if you're working with multiple customers as an independent developer or something like that. It really makes it easy there. But what you want to do is make sure your subscription, and in our case, our primary account, is selected. Once you've done that, click OK. Now at this point, the window goes away and you are now officially connected into Alpha Cloud. And that allows you then to access all of the other different capabilities or features of Alpha Cloud. Now what we're going to do here is, instead of going through each of those features individually, which over time we will, I want to go ahead and just dive in and start publishing. That way we can actually show you the mechanics of getting your first application up on the cloud and working great. So in that case, we're going to hold off here, and next section, we're going to go ahead and start publishing our one-page application. Now that we have our credentials set up, we're ready to go ahead and move forward. Now in this case, we're just going to go ahead and go through the publishing steps, and through that process, set up a lot of the pieces that are needed for a successful publish to the Alpha Cloud. Now you would think you would go to the publish here, but rather you want to go to the Alpha Cloud publish right here. Now, if this is the first time, which I anticipate, you're going to be shown the Alpha Cloud publish, and you'll notice we don't have any profiles here. So make sure you've selected these items here and select Create New Profile and click OK. Now you can name the profile anything you want, but I'm going to go ahead and start out by considering this my development profile. And we'll talk a little bit more about having a production profile and a development profile in terms of if you want to publish up sort of your early test code, maybe you have development, QA, and production. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this development. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, since this is the first application I am publishing, you'll see that a lot of these items here are grayed out. So it's selected my subscription and my account. And you'll notice here we have application, and it's blank. So what we want to do first is manage applications so we can add our new application in. So I'm going to click here, Manage Applications. This will open up our Manage Applications dialog box. And you'll see we have our first one here. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to call this Single Page Application. And again, you can call it anything you want. My status is defaulted to active, and it's using my primary contact information here. And I'm going to go ahead and click Apply Changes. After I click Apply Changes, I can now click Close. And in a moment, the screen will refresh. And you'll notice now that my application name is here. Important to know, you will be able to have multiple applications up on Alpha Cloud. And we'll talk a little bit more detail about how to manage that later. Now, once I've actually added or selected the application here, you'll notice that my buttons down here became active. So this now allows me to take the next step, which is to set up my deployment options. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and manage website, because when we deploy this up to Alpha Cloud, we want to have a website address ready to go that will link to our application. So I'm going to click Manage Websites. This will open up and you'll see I have an existing website. I could go ahead and use that one, but I want to go ahead and create a website just dedicated for this particular application. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm going to double click and go in there, and I'm going to call this Single Page Application. Now, important, that doesn't have to be the same name as the application. It can be anything you want. And you'll see in a minute how Alpha uses that in terms of the website name. Now you can select the other elements of it, such as who the primary contact is, the current status. You can pick HTTP or HTTPS, although more and more you really need HTTPS. We'll come back and talk about this later, but if you have a certificate, you can apply it here, and you can also set some other elements. And again, we're going to go into a little more detail on that a little bit later. Now you'll notice two things. First, down here you have web path, and you'll notice it created a default web path for this website. And you can see it's gkt-singlepageapplication.cloud.alphasolver.com. And so as you do this, it's going to create these default ones, but you can always map your own application website names to an application. Now, before we leave here, we actually want to go ahead and set up a second website. So I'm going to go here, and you'll notice our first one, single page application. I'm going to go ahead and edit this. I'm going to say single page application -dev. So I'm adding a second website to my Alpha Cloud environment. The first one is going to be for my production app. The second one is going to be for my development app. And I like to have the different endpoints because then it's very simple when I go into testing and other things that it's very clear one URL goes to my development environment, one goes to my production environment. So after you enter single page application -dev, go ahead and apply those changes. And like the first website, it will now add that into the system. So now I have the production one and I also have the development one. And if you'll notice my web path again, you'll see that it's appended that single page application dev. So it's actually now has a different URL for that. And go ahead and click close. Now that we've set up our websites, we can now go ahead and move forward to create our first deployment. And in our case, we're going to create a development deployment and use that for the next few steps. So let's add our first deployment. Go ahead and click the Add Deployment here. This will open up the Add Deployment screen. As you'll notice at the top, it's telling me what subscription and account I'm using. It has defaulted to single page application, but if I had multiple applications, you would see a series of them here, so you can pick the particular application you want this deployment for. So let's go ahead and type development. That is going to be the name for this deployment. Over here under website, we're going to go ahead and click here and select our development website, because when we deploy this, we want to be able to hit it with that development website address. Okay. Now you can give a description for this. You'll see it defaulted to my primary contact information and status. And last but not least, you have security storage. Now we'll come back and go into more details on that. Let's leave the default as it is now. And again, we'll have a whole section on what security storage is and how to manage that. And you'll notice down below, since we added, or rather selected this website, you can see we have, this is where this URL is going to be for this deployment. So now we click OK. And you'll now see that we have our application set up. We now have our deployment set up, and we can walk through this here. So you'll see first that our deployment is currently the development one. User enroll, again, we'll come back to that, but it's set for preserve. Application logging is basic. This is where you can tell it how much logging you would like it to do when it's on the server. So if you're doing more development stuff, you may want to go to debugging or something like that. And it just saves more data into the log files. Now, very important, you're going to see here server version build. Now, this is really neat. Basically, every version of Alpha that gets released gets saved on the server. So you can literally pick exactly what this deployment will use as an application server from Alpha. So I've got it currently selected to the current production build. But as you can see, it also includes pre-releases. So this allows you to create deployments that use new versions of Alpha that allow you to not touch your existing versions. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm going to go ahead and leave it defaulted to the current production release. And now I'm done in terms of creating my deployment here. And again, notice my web path down here is dictated by this deployment. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now, very important, if you have Alpha DAO connection strings, it's going to ask you, well, when it's running on the server, what should that connection string be? And this is very similar to what we do on the standalone server. Basically, when you deploy it, for this deployment, we can set a specific application Alpha DAO connection string. So for instance, if I'm in development, I could set it to point to a development database. What's in production, I can point it to another development database or to another production database. So I'm going to go ahead and click here to go ahead and do so. And you'll notice that I have one built-in connection string. Let's go ahead and edit that connection string, and let's edit default value. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use the same connection string on all of our implementations. It's basically a cloud database we can hit from there, and click OK. So now that we've edited that connection string, when we deploy to this deployment, it knows what connection string it should use. So go ahead and click OK. And once we've done that, we can now click Close. So now we have our initial development publishing profile / deployment ready to go. And you can create as many publishing profiles as you need for your particular development process. Okay, let's go ahead and stop here, and we'll go ahead and do a publish in the next section and show you it in operation. To publish using the deployment we just created, we click Development here, which is the profile, and click OK. In my case, it's going to show me a list of files to be published. You can disable this if you don't want to see that each time. Go ahead and click OK. Now it's compiling those files, and here is the first step. You'll notice that the application publish progress bar comes up, and you'll see it's going through and packaging everything up and moving it up to the Alpha Cloud. That's step one. Now you'll notice that once that's completed, now all the other operations are actually done on the cloud. In fact, you could go ahead and close this window right here if you so choose, because it's all happening on the cloud. But what you'll see in a moment is you're going to see the deployment events start to update. Now, the first time you do a deployment, it may take a little longer than normal just because it's doing some initial housekeeping tasks. But as you can see, it's telling you what is happening on the cloud. In this case, it's taking all of your files, it's setting up your server environment, setting up your website, setting up your connection strings, all of those elements. A huge amount of things is going on underneath there. And it's telling you at each step what's going on. And as you'll see, boom, now it's completed and everything is up to go and we're done. And you'll see our status right here of deployment status is that it's complete and your application is ready. Now, if this is taking a long time, you can click refresh and it'll automatically refresh. And you'll see it takes a little longer once your applications get a little bigger, but it's not that really different from what you saw today. And if you ever have an issue or problem, you can copy these events to the clipboard and send it to the development team for review. Now, we have just finished our 2 steps of deploy and publish. It is now operational. We can go ahead and click our website link here, or you can copy it and paste it into your web browser. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. This will go ahead and open up my browser. And success. You'll see that now we have our application running in the cloud, and our web URL, our development one, is pointed and working correctly. You'll notice that it's showing not only the HTML, but also our uploaded images, and obviously if we had UXs, grids, etc., all of that would be operating on the cloud. As you can see, after you do the initial setup, the beauty is that a lot of the developer operations of setting up a server and doing all the other stuff is taken care of for you so that you can focus on your application and less on the environment. Now that we have our first application published, let's take a few moments to update it and check it out and show you that update process. So I'm going to go back into Alpha. I'm going to go ahead and open up my index page here. And I'm going to go ahead and just put in version 2.0. So I'm clicking after Alpha505 training course and putting in version 2.0. And I'm clicking Save. Now you can still use the publish capability here, but I want to go ahead and show you how to do it in the regular Web Projects control panel. So let's return to the Web Projects control panel. Let's click on Alpha Cloud and click the second item, which is Publish. This will open up our publishing profiles. Now that we have everything set up, we just have to click the publishing profile we would like and click OK. Again, this will show us a list of files that are going to get published, and click OK once again. As we saw before, the first step is it is now publishing your items to the cloud. So it's deploying it. And now it's showing you the second step where on the cloud it's going to take all these changes, our simple ones in this case, and go ahead and deploy it and update our application on the cloud. You'll notice that all the events have been updated and our application is now live on the cloud. So let's go ahead and click our URL here to reopen it. And you'll notice the new version is online and ready to go with any and all changes we've made. Now let's do one third change. And the reason why I want to is because in the next section, I'm going to show you a couple really cool features around the Alpha Cloud. So let's go back into the Alpha Cloud or back into the Alpha development environment. Let's go into our HTML editor. So reopen index.a5w and let's change this from version 2 to version 3 and save it. Now in this case, I know everything's good to go, so I'm just going to go ahead and publish it right here. So I'm going to go up to the control bar. I'm going to click Publish, Publish to Development. And this will shortcut and open up that Publish Your Projects to Alpha Cloud. So now we click OK. This will open up our files to be published. And now click OK. It's going to go through the first step of compiling everything and moving it up to the cloud. And now it's going through our second step where it's now deploying it. And in our next section, I'm going to show you why it's so important that it does this two-stage process. It really opens up a lot of really neat capabilities for you and your development process. It's completed that step. Now we can reopen our web page. By the way, I could just click refresh, and now you'll see we have version 3.0. And in fact, if I go to that first page we reopened and refresh it, you're going to see it's going to bring up the most current version that's up on the cloud. So publishing is pretty straightforward. Once you have it set up, it works really nicely, and it's pretty snappy. The system is optimized to try and make your life easier. Note that when you get to that second step, you don't actually have to sit there and wait. You can close that window and move along, and Alpha Cloud will, in the background, continue moving forward and complete the deployment process. In our next section, I want to show you a cool thing about how you can monitor your cloud and also one of the most powerful capabilities of this deployment process. Now that we have our first application published, now we can explore a little bit more of some of the powerful features of Alpha Cloud and also talk about some really neat things you can do with that infrastructure. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Web Projects control panel. I'm going to go here to Alpha Cloud and I'm going to go ahead and select Preferences. What I want to do is basically make sure my login is good to go. So I can put in my username and password. Again, I have it remember me. I can verify credentials. And then I can select, again, the subscription and account that I'm using. So if I'm using multiple subscriptions, I can move between them fairly readily. Now I'm going to click OK. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go to Alpha Cloud and select View Cloud. This opens up our cloud view, which is just an overview of my cloud installations. And it's going to be able to address any of my applications and deployments. So let's go through this real quick. First, you'll see up top, it's confirming my subscription, my account. You'll see that it's showing my applications. In this case, I only have one. And then also in deployment, you'll see we only have one deployment. So I select those options, and now the area below reflects that information. So first and foremost, you're going to notice that it's giving me my web link URL. So if you ever need to find your web link URL for an application deployment, you can just go right here. Secondly, it's going to provide me information about that installation. So one thing I want to draw your attention to is up in the right-hand corner for update usage and logs. When things are happening on the Alpha Cloud, there's a little bit of a delay between when it happens on Alpha Cloud and it goes into the logging environment. So if you want to make sure you have the most current update usage and logs, you can just click here and that will update the information and you can tell what time frames. Now that you've updated that usage and log information, all the data down here is now up to date. So let's walk through those so you can see what they are. First, here are the servers. And one of the neat things about Alpha Cloud is that it actually deploys 2 separate servers on your behalf, which is nice because if one fails, it automatically picks up the steam with the other one. And it really allows you to do a lot of very powerful sort of high availability capabilities. And again, that's all taken care of for you under the covers, so you never have to worry about that. Next, let's look at deployment events. This will show you the last deployment events here that we achieved. You're going to copy this events to the clipboard. So if there's a problem or something you need to work with Alpha Cloud support, this allows you to do it. You can also click here and say refresh deployment status, and that's going to update the latest information down here. And you'll see it's just refreshed that data here. Next, we can go to server load. Now you'll notice that we can see here different requests and CPU time. And the reason why is that let's go ahead and modify this. Update the usage and logs. And now we can go to the server load and make sure we have that information. So you'll see what's going on here is that we have the ability to monitor what's going on with the system. And again, that's for this application and this deployment. So if you have multiple ones, you'll be able to see those. So as you can see here, it's giving me my request, how often people are hitting my site. What is the CPU time? How much CPU time is being used? And then other things like data received, data sent, average CPU, I mean a whole wealth of information. And this information is nice to know because if over time you can monitor if certain applications are generating and using a lot of server resources. So if that's happening, you'll be able to quickly detect that and be able to modify and adjust as you see fit. Now I'm also going to go here to application requests. Now this is showing me, well, okay, the application that's running, and again, what is the request for? Now this is a pretty simple. You can see here we have indexed A5W, the favicon, and our logo. So this is, since we haven't done a lot of activity on here, it's pretty simplistic. It says right now the index page is what's being requested the most. So you can see that's super valuable down the road in terms of your ability to see how your applications are performing and more importantly, what part of your application is causing the most request. And you can do that for request. You can do that for CPU time. So as you can see, almost all the CPU time is involved with my index page and data received, etc. So this information right here, again, guides you to the performance of your application and how you can do it. And you can save all of this information using these buttons down here. Now, another key area is our server logs. And we're going to go back and talk a little bit more about that later on. But you can see in here, this gives us any kind of server log activity within the system. And you can see it in different timestamps. So the nice thing about it is that if there's any IIS events, they will show here. Now this is your Alpha Anywhere logs. This will be able to show you different times and what's going on. And it's been a while since I've run this, so it's not showing me a lot of information on terms of when it's happening. But you would see that log information here, which is very handy, and we'll show later on how you can use it from a debugging standpoint. You also have what are called IIS failed request logs. If you're having problems on your system on there, this information is very critical to help you identify and lock down those. And then also crash dumps are where IIS just basically says, I've got a problem, and again, something deeper. But often, if you have run into little problems like this, having access to those dump files are helpful because those can be sent to Alpha for review. So this is your View Cloud. This allows you to look at the overall status of all your different aspects of your application's deployments. I really like the ability to see the server loading and the application loading, other pieces right there. And again, you can modify your usage and time frame here. So by adjusting the dates and hitting here, it will call and update this information appropriately. Now I want to go ahead and in the next one talk a little bit more about deployments and one of the really powerful features of the deployment capability, which we'll discover next. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and now we're ready to explore the next aspect. So as we mentioned earlier, all of your functions are available under the Alpha Cloud little icon menu here. And we're going to explore these in more detail, but the one I'd like you to focus on next is go to Advanced Deployments. So again, Advanced Deployments. And as you can see, you could access any of the specific areas, but we're going to focus on that at this point in time. Now that we've done that, we can actually look at our deployments in detail. So the other side was just kind of the latest information on your deployments at a high level, and this is now drilling down into your deployments. So this is a fairly complex screen, but we're going to walk through this. So as before, you're going to see your subscription and account up top, your list of applications, I only have one. Then down here you have your deployments. And as we've seen, we only have one deployment, but we'll come back and develop another one and put it in the system for you to review. So you'll see right now this deployment is active. If you want to, you can say disabled and it will automatically stop any activity on the server. You also see when I deployed this, here's the current security storage information. So you can see exactly what security storage information is being used in this particular situation. You can see right now you have your complete web path. You can also see what website this deployment has been deployed to and the path that's within that website. So these are all the elements we did when we set up our deployment, but this allows you to quickly review that. Now down below is very critical information. Basically, you'll see this is our schedule. So if you'll notice right now, it's saying active, present, and future deployments. So currently here are the active and potential future. Now we don't have any future, but you'll see those in a few moments. So you'll see first that this is the current active. This is when it started. Here's when it's going to end, the status, and this is the application version. And this is very important. It's basically telling us which version of our application. And you'll notice, remember, we did 3 publishes, 1, 2, and 3. And so it's showing currently that third one we did is currently available. It's also showing what version and build is available, what we did as far as users and groups, and the current logging. So this basically is our history of our publish and deploys that we did before. Now, let's go ahead and go to here to schedule, and let's modify that from active present to all deployments. Now you're going to see a history of your deployments that were done on the server. And the neat thing about it is that it remembers each of these deployments. So this was our very first one here. It's automatically numbered with a incrementally numbered item called version 1. And here's the data. Now you'll notice most of the same because we didn't make any changes. But if we had made changes to what version of Alpha we used, etc., it would show here. So we have our first deployment here. Here's our second one, which was done about 6 minutes after the first one. And our third one that was done another 2 minutes after that. So you'll see right here, it also tells us when that was active. So it was from this time to this time, this time to this time. And you'll notice our current one is from this time to essentially forever, 2099 at 11:59 p.m. And it shows us our status right here. So you can always go back and review your deployment history and have available. Now, what's really neat is the ability to do what's called rollback. So this is your overview. And now let's jump into the next section where we can show you the details of how to do a rollback. So a rollback is what it sounds like. It allows us to roll back to a previous version of your deployments. And since Alpha Cloud stores all of your deployments, it's a very simple step to do. So let's say, just for history, that everything was working great on version 2, that second version we sent out. Working fine. Then you go, okay, I've got some great ideas, I've got new features, etc. And then you deploy version 3. And for whatever reason, it's not operating the way you want. Either there's a bug or the change wasn't accepted or who knows. And you go, you know what? I really want to go back to version 2. Now, traditionally, that would be kind of a pain. Unless you were using version control on your local machine, you have to kind of reassemble it. There could be a lot of changes and it may take time. Whereas we want to get this thing done immediately. So now what we can do is very simple. Select the version. Actually, you can select. So click Add to Schedule. You'll notice there it created a new row. And this is where we can adjust and tell it for this new deployment. So essentially, instead of going back to our development machine and doing a deployment, we're going to actually have it all done on the cloud. So first, it's saying when do we want to do the available start. I'm going to leave that here. When do we want it to end it? Again, it defaults to perpetual. We want our status to be active. Now, it's asking us, well, what version of the application do we want to add to the schedule? So in our case, we're going to click 2 because I want to roll back to the version 2. Which version of Alpha? Well, I can modify this. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is now, but I could modify that to any of my new versions, old versions, etc. What do I want to do with users and groups? Leave it be. And then logging, let's go ahead and make sure we're doing the debugging level of logging. So we've essentially set up our deployment. Now, if we look at our website, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this and open up our website so we can see what it looks like right now. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to our, and we'll load that up. And so you'll see we're at our version 3. That was the last one we did before. So now I'm going to go back into Alpha, and I'm going to go, okay, everything's great. I'm going to roll back to number 2. I'm going to go down here to the right. I'm going to say apply changes. Now what's happened is that I've applied the change. I've basically given a set of instructions. And you notice everything updated here. So if I actually go here to active, present, and future, you'll see that our future deployment, which is actually probably done, it's very quick because it's small, is this. So this is my current active one that's right now. So once we've done that, it may take a couple minutes. It depends on your application, depends on how complex it is, the security, etc. But once I clicked apply, it went ahead and kicked off the process on Alpha Cloud to do the update of our deployment. So let's go back into our web browser, and I'm going to go ahead and remember version 3 is right here. Let's click there, and you'll see, voila, I'm now back to version 2. And that version 2 is everything that was at that point in time, meaning all the settings, the variables, the connection strings, the grids, the components, whatever it is done at that point in time. So as you can see, this is a super simple and easy way for you to roll back if in case anything happens. I can go here and say, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm just going to say, you know what? We've got to add to schedule. So I'm going to add a new one to the schedule. I want to go ahead and bring it back up to version 3. I probably would have published a version 4, but I can go ahead and do that, and we'll set the debugging to be here. So I'll go ahead and apply those changes. So now what's happening is currently it is behind the scenes setting up and scheduling that process here. So now that we have that, we go back in here, give it a moment, probably done by now. So I'm going to go ahead and do a reload. And you'll notice in this case, it hasn't happened because there is a slight delay. It depends on how heavily loaded the Alpha Cloud environment is. And I waited for a little bit, and now you're seeing, and it took probably 45 seconds to a minute in this case. May take a little longer. Then again, it depends on your application. So we'll see. Now we're back up to version 3. If I go back in here, you can see which version it's telling me is the current. And actually, if I want to, I could go to all deployments, and it shows me my history. Notice my first 3, then I rolled back to 2, and then I went to 3. And I want to show you one other cool feature that you can use in this particular situation. Now, because Alpha Cloud handles the deployment and publishing in the following method, there's one other really cool feature that's available, and that's called scheduling your deployments. And you can either do it here or in your actual publishing profile. So I'd like to go ahead in my publishing profile and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here. I'm going to go ahead and let's say we're going to go ahead and make our version 4.0. So I'm going to go ahead to my HTML editor, and I'm going to add my new version 4.0. It has a bunch of cool features and capabilities there. And I did all this work, and I said, you know what? I kind of want to deploy this on the weekend. So I want to have this deployed maybe Saturday night or Sunday morning at 1 a.m., which I know, well, there's not going to be a lot of, but I don't want to have to get up at 1 a.m. on Sunday morning to do this. Well, I don't have to. I can let our friend Alpha Cloud take care of that for me. So I'm going to go here to the Web Projects Control Panel. I'm going to go to Alpha Cloud and say Publish. I'm going to go ahead and select Development. This is my development publication. And I'm going to go ahead and select Development. And before that, I'm going to edit the profile. and there's my publishing settings, etc. So I go into my publishing settings here. And you'll notice here, we have the following situation. Up here, we have our regular selected cloud application you would want to publish. So that's GKT, primary, and single. Now down below, you see it says deploy immediately when published. That means once it gets up to Alpha Cloud, it's going to go ahead and publish it. I'm going to disable that. Now I've selected all of my options here. So let's say I'm using a newer version of Alpha or doing something like that, but I've disabled this deploy immediately. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and click OK again. This will take me back to my publishing profile, and I'm going to click OK. So now I've set my parameters, so I'm going to say just put it up on Alpha Cloud, but don't go ahead and make it active. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. This goes through the process of packaging everything up, all my version 4.0 changes, and moving it up to Alpha Cloud. Now you'll notice I get a message here. Instead of that second screen showing me the deployment process, it actually tells you it's up on there, but it's up to you now to use Alpha Cloud to decide when you want that to be deployed. So I'm going to go ahead and click Close. So I'm done. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back to Alpha Cloud, Advanced Deployments, and select that. So we're going to go back to where we were when we were doing the rollback aspects. Okay. So we're back to our Manage Deployments screen. We'll see we're in our name, deployment, etc. And we can see down right now, we have active and future deployments. And currently there is only one thing, which is our active deployment, which is our version 3.0. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's click All Deployments. Now you'll see something interesting. This is the history of where they go. And again, we're only seeing the items we've deployed before, our rollback and our rollback to our current one. Now let's go ahead and click Add to Schedule. That opens up here, puts in a certain time, the end date, active, and guess what? I get to select our new version 4.0. So I'm saying, okay, when this triggers, I want it to send out that new version. And I can pick the version of Alpha, user groups, and the logging. So I'll go ahead and just put in debugging here. Now this is where it gets really interesting. So this is currently the current time. So I'm going to actually go in here and I can modify that and give it a future time. So I could actually say, you know what? I want it to go on the 31st, or I'm going to keep it there and I'm going to do it at 3:05, so 3 minutes from now. And now what I can do is click Apply Changes. So now it's setting up and applying the changes. Now before it would immediately deploy that because we said as soon as you go, the available start was there. But we've set an available start of 3:05. So now let's go here to All Present and Future Deployments. And now you'll notice something. There's the current deployment, and now there's our other one scheduled for 3:05. So I'm going to go back into Alpha or back into our browser. I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. And you'll notice we're still at 3.0 because we haven't gotten to that deployment time frame. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on pause. We're going to wait for a couple minutes. I'm not going to have to force you to wait for that. And we'll be back in a minute with the results. So as you can see, when we reached the appointed time, Alpha went ahead and deployed that. And now we're seeing our version 4.0. So as you can see, this allows you to pre-schedule deployments so you don't have to be sitting there behind your machine waiting to do it. And this is very handy, especially in more complex scenarios that allow you to simplify your what's called developer operations. Now let's go back into Alpha Cloud and let's go ahead and look. And let's go ahead and look at our all deployments. So you'll see now we have our new deployment showing when it's active. And if we go back to all present and future, you'll see there's only one because our scheduled deployment happened and now that is the current present build. So that is a really nice feature. It's very handy and it will allow you to better control your deployment process and make your life a lot easier. Now, before we exit, I want to close here. I'm going to go to Alpha Cloud and go to Publish. I'm going to edit that profile And I'm going to go back here to publishing settings. And the reason for that is I want to normally deploy immediately for my development. I basically want to put it up there so I can see my development or QA ready to go there. My production, I may turn that off so I manually set when that goes out. But the benefit of this is that I really want to make sure the moment I deploy it, it's going to go ahead and be unwrapped and put up and ready to go as fast as possible for testing and other pieces there. So I'm going to click there, going to click OK, and I'm going to save this as our development profile. Now what I want to do is add a production one, so now I have two profiles, and we'll do that in the next section. So up to now, we've been working with one publishing profile. And in this case, we had one application, one deployment that was set up. Now what I'd like to do is go ahead and create a second publishing profile, which I will use for publishing to production. So I'm going to go to my publisher project in Alpha Cloud, reached through the Alpha Cloud icon menu here. I'm going to click Create New Profile and click OK. And I'm going to call this Production. And I'm going to click OK. So this brings up our publish settings. Now it's gone ahead and defaulted it to my current selections, which is fine. But in our case, we want to add a new deployment because we want to have a different set of parameters in terms of how it goes up on Alpha Cloud. So in order to do so, we click Add Deployment here on the right. We now are seeing our Add Deployment screen. We can go ahead and give it a name, and I'm going to call this Production. Now, as we did before, we want to go ahead and select the website. So instead of dev, we actually want to use our single page application website we started a while back. Now we can select our primary contact and status, and over here our security storage. And this is important, you'll see later, as we can use our existing one or create a whole separate one that's going to be used for this particular deployment. Now, if you hadn't actually set up this single app, these different websites, you could go ahead and go right here to manage websites, and that'll allow you to go ahead and on the fly create a new website. Now you'll notice also down here that I selected website. Here is going to be my web path of my production website. So now I'm going to click OK. So now I have so you'll notice it's updated this now to production. So now I have my two deployments. It's going to ask me what I want to do with my users and roles, my logging. I'll just go ahead and do complete for this. And I can also select for this particular deployment what version of Alpha I would like to use. So I'm going to leave it as the current defaulted. And now I'm going to click OK. Now, since this is the first time we've done this publishing profile, we haven't set up our connection strings. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. We'll see over on the left side our production. Click here, click edit, and I'm going to just default value. Now reality is you'll probably have a different connection string to point to a different production database. I'm pointing it all to the same location for the purposes of our work today, but you will most likely have different database instances. Now I'm going to click OK and OK once again. Now that I've done that, I can click close. So now you'll notice I have two profiles, development and production. So I'm going to go ahead and do our first item. Now remember, we're at version 4, so that's going to be our first deployment, and I'll go ahead and leave it as is. So I've been doing my development work, got to version 4, everything's looking good, ready now to put that up on production. And I'm going to click OK. This is going to tell us which files we're going to send up, and I'm going to click OK. So step 1, it's going to package everything up for Alpha Cloud. Now, since we called it and told it to do deploy immediately, it's going to immediately start deploying it on the server. And again, if you want, you could use that delayed or scheduled deployment if you so choose. So now you'll see we have our application has now been deployed. It's showing us our URL where that's at. Here's the history of that. So I'm going to go ahead and click here to open it up in my web browser. And it's going to look identical. But you'll notice that the URL now is different from our other URL. And it's essentially a whole different implementation or deployment, and they both now live on Alpha Cloud. In fact, we can demonstrate that. Let's go back into Alpha. Let's go into our index, and let's say next week we're starting on version 5.0. So we go ahead and save that. We're good to go. We want to go ahead and do an Alpha Cloud publish. Now I'm going to go to development, and I'm going to click OK. And I'll come back in a moment. It's going to go through those normal steps. Don't want to have you sit around for that. So it's gone through all the steps and it's confirming that the application is now ready. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my web browser. Now this is my production site here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a refresh. And you'll notice we're still seeing version 4.0. Let's go over here to my single page application and I'm on the dev site. Let's do a refresh here, and you'll notice now we're on version 5.0. So now I can safely deploy different versions, different environments, one for production, one for QA, one for development, and they live and coexist peacefully on Alpha Cloud. Now what we can do is we can go back into Alpha. I'm going to go ahead and close this here, and I want to go ahead and go into my advanced deployments. So I'm going to reopen my deployment screen. So now we can see our status of where our deployments are. So you'll notice that it defaulted to my deployment of development here. And you'll notice my current one is application version 6.0. Now let's go over here to production. And now you'll notice that this is currently what's on my production. So you can see in here that we're at application version 5.0. Which is the 4.0 on the screen. So it's a little confusing, but it's our 5th version of publishing it up there. So you can see our development is one ahead of our production. So I can see what the status is there and be able to see any and all history, etc. Now, if I go in here and I say all deployments for production, you're going to notice we only have one deployment we've done for production. Whereas if we go to development, we can see we have a whole series of deployments that are available within there to review. So let me go back to production here. So that's one of the key benefits is you can spin up, deploy these applications, have different environments, different settings, etc., and they all work together seamlessly on Alpha Cloud. In this section, I'm going to take you through some of the other management capabilities of Alpha Cloud. So let's start out by exploring some of the other menu items below the Alpha Cloud. So first I'm going to click on Alpha Cloud and I'm going to go down here to Advanced Subscriptions. This opens up our Managed Subscriptions and this shows me what subscriptions I have. Now most likely you only have a single subscription here and I've blurred out some of the text here since it's other entities I'm working with. But this allows you to work with your subscriptions. And you can see the general paradigm is you have your list of subscriptions up top and all the things you can do with each one of those subscriptions down below. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Next, what I'd like you to do is go to Advanced Accounts. Now in this particular situation, it's opened up our Managed Accounts screen. And this is showing only the accounts for my Giant Killer training. When I went and did my preferences to tell it what subscription I was using, it is now limiting that data for me to see. So you can see I currently have one account, but I could add multiple accounts in here. And this is kind of valuable from the standpoint of tracking. When you start looking at what is happening with your different deployments, if they're parts of different accounts, then you can start segmenting it for, say, billing purposes or just management aspects. Also, with accounts, you can define other authorized maintainers. I'd like to go ahead and talk about that at this point here. What an authorized maintainer is another Alpha Cloud user that has permissions to work within your account. So I can actually sit there and say, okay, click Manage Authorized Maintainers for my primary account. And when I do that, I could put in, let's say it's johndoe@gmail.com. And what this would do is it would allow this person, if they had an account with Alpha Cloud, John Doe at gmail.com, allow them to be an authorized maintainer. And then also within here, I can go to the effective authorization and essentially tell exactly what this person can do. And there's a number of different authorization levels that allow other individuals to do things. So you can limit what they can do. Let's say it's a developer and you only want them to do a few things. Maybe they only get to deploy to certain scenarios, etc. You can really lock it down. And so that's the idea of authorized maintainers. You have the subscription owner who has control of everything. And then at different levels, you can actually authorize different maintainers. You can actually authorize someone to be a maintainer at the subscription level, but you want to be careful because there's billing and financial implications of that. So I'm going to go ahead and discard the changes here, but I wanted to kind of note on this that within my account, I could set up multiple accounts, and for each of those accounts, I could have different people have authorization to be able to use and work within those accounts. Very handy and very simple, and at any time you can go ahead and add and remove authorized maintainers as you see fit. So I'm going to click close here. Now I'm going to go to advanced and I'm going to go to applications. So when we started our process, we actually created our first application, but we're not limited to an application or a single application. I could be building multiple applications to be deployed on my Alpha Cloud subscription. So if I'm like a third-party provider, I might have some apps for one company, apps for another company, and they can all be separated, and you can manage them around the account aspects. The other aspect you can do is you can set up authorized maintainers to be only able to access those applications or individual applications. So you can really fine-tune your control so your other people who are helping you out can only see the items and the elements that they should. So as you can see this, I could create other applications in here, and we will be doing something along those lines when we get to our other parts of the training later on. So I'm going to go ahead and click close here. I'm going to go to Alpha Cloud, Advanced, and now I'm going to go to Websites. Now we've been here before. In our case, we created 2 different websites, but I could go in here and start adding other websites that I might need for other parts of my system. And you'll see that a little later there. I can also go in here and do my uploads of my certificates and other elements. Plus I can get my egress IPs if I need to be able to connect these websites to external resources such as databases and things along those lines. I'm going to go ahead and click close. I'm going to select advanced deployments. And we've been here extensively before, so I'm not going to spend any more time on it, but this is how you go in and check the deployments for your different applications and specifically your different deployments within those applications there. Now, the last thing I'd like to show you is Alpha Cloud status. I'm going to go ahead and click here, and this shows you currently the status. And so these are the current regions that are available, and that's very important because you may be targeting specific deployments in certain areas, i.e. Europe or US or things. So, and these will grow over time. We'll have other regions that are available as our clients require it. But this gives you information in terms of those deployments and their IPs and all the backgrounds from those standpoints. I'm going to go ahead and click close. So that covers that really quickly. We're going to go now move on to how we can handle and do API work with Alpha Cloud. And I think you're really going to enjoy the process. So we're now going to dive into how to use Alpha Cloud to deploy APIs, and specifically the ability to do serverless API delivery. It's a very, very powerful technique that I think you'll find valuable in your future development purposes. So let's do a quick little recap. So part of what we want to show is the ability to deploy something to the Alpha Cloud that really doesn't have like web pages or interfaces. All it really does is have a set of API endpoints to be able to call for data and business logic. So I'm in my project here. I'm going to go here to default web service. It's the third item here. And I have 3 projects within this. So I'm going to go to web service. And you're going to see I have a number of different things. First, I have a set or one web service called Alpha Sports. Secondly, I have a class called Alpha Sports. And I'm going to show you how I put these together a little bit later. And then I also have an A5W page here for testing the API in case I need to do it. This is not required, but it's kind of handy during the development process. So what I want to show you is the endpoint, which is the following. I'm going to go now into what's called Postman. Postman is a free, although they have paid versions of it, development tool that allows you to simply call web API endpoints and be able to exercise them without having to write a bunch of code or do anything else. And the basic idea is that you can create different type of calls, put in a URL, and then call that, and it will actually show you the response. And you can put in things like headers and body and things like that if there's security available. So I'm currently in Postman, and on the left-hand side, I've got my Alpha505, and I've got something here called products. And basically, it's my endpoint that allows me to get a selected set of products. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to click Send. In a moment, you'll see the bottom part has been refreshed, and it's pulled back from Alpha Cloud a set of data in JSON. In this case, it comes from a database table that's behind the scenes. So if we want to, we can go over here and look at the body of this call. So here is what is going to be submitted to my endpoint. So you can see it's got a series of values that you can send to help do filtering, etc. You can set page size, and I'm going to go ahead and change this to page size number 1, or I'm sorry, page number. I'm going to hit send again. And what it's going to do is take this information and submit it to this endpoint. In a moment, and let me bring this up here, you'll see now that it's bringing back page 1 and the data that's from there. So this is just a simple way for you to exercise API endpoints. I'm going to come back and explore this a little bit more as we set up and test our endpoints when we do the development here. But suffice it to say that it's a combination of doing the work in Alpha development, deploying it to Alpha Cloud, and then exercising it here. Pretty fun. So the next step is I'm going to go back in Alpha, and we're going to go ahead and set up our deployment to Alpha Cloud to take our web service and our XBasic and put it up there. And then the last part is I'll actually go back through and do a quick demonstration of how I created this, but I want to have our primary focus be on how to deploy this to Alpha Cloud. Now we're ready to go ahead and set up our deployment and do our initial deployment. So the first step is to go to Alpha Cloud, and I like to go to Preferences. And in this case, I do my Verify of Credentials. Then I select my Giant Killer Training subscription and account. So therefore, I'm pointed to the right subscription. Most likely this will be your only subscription, but in my case, I have multiple, so I want to make sure I'm pointed to the correct one. So our first step is we need URLs or websites to be able to deploy to. So I'm going to go through in this case and I'm going to set everything up at the beginning. That way I have everything ready to go and it's easier later on to just go ahead and create my publishes. So our first step is I'm going to actually deploy this as a new application. It could be a part of my previous application, but I want to kind of keep things separate and also give you an idea of how you can have multiple applications running on Alpha Cloud. So I'm going to go here to Alpha Cloud, I'm going to go to Advanced, and I'm going to click Applications. And this will open up my Manage Applications. So we have our previous one here, single page application, and I want to go ahead and add in our new one here. Now notice it's interesting. I haven't actually set up any publishing profiles or anything. This is all up on Alpha Cloud. So when you're on this menu here, you're pretty much so to a large degree working on Alpha Cloud. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go API application. And again, you can call it anything you want. And I'm going to click Apply Changes. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and click Close, and I've set up my application. Now that I have my application, I want to do the following. I want to set up my websites or my endpoints for it. So I'm going to go here to Websites. You'll notice I kind of go in sequence here. So I'm going to go to Websites, and this will open up my website manager. So I've got my single page one, but now I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to call this Alpha Sports API -dev. So the first one I'm going to create is Alpha Sports API -dev. And I'm going to keep everything the same after that. So I kind of scoot out of that and I click Apply Changes. Now I have my first website. I want to create my production website. I go ahead and put in here Alpha Sports API. And in this case, I'm going to leave it without the dev. This will be my production endpoint. Go ahead and exit out of that and click Apply Changes. Now, if I had set up database other elements like that, my egress IPs do not change. And you always want to double check that, but therefore I'm good to go there. So now I have my two websites ready to go and I can click Close. So I've set up my new application. I've set up my websites I want to use for that application. And now I'm going to go ahead and start setting up my deployments. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Alpha Cloud, Advanced Deployments. Now you'll see up here in the left-hand corner, I've got single page application. So my previous work we did before, but I also have up here application. And you'll see right now we don't have any deployments, meaning that we have not published or put anything on Alpha Cloud. So you can see there's no active, present, or future deployments. So now what I can do is I can add a deployment for this. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click Add Deployment. I go into here and this is my Add Deployment screen. This is similar to what we saw before. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm selecting my application, API application. Now I'm going to go here and I'm going to go ahead and say development. So I'm creating a development one that's specific for this application. Now over here, it's asking me, well, what website am I going to use? Well, in my case, I want to use my development website that I've created. So I'm going to select Alpha Sports API.dev or -dev. Going to leave the path the same. Now, this last part, security, we're going to cover in our next section. So I'm just going to let it be and allow Alpha Cloud to go ahead and set up those pieces there. And we're going to dive into a lot more detail on that in the next section. So you'll notice down, since I've set up this, you'll see the particular web path is right here. This is what the URL endpoint is going to be for this particular development site. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now you'll notice two things. After we've created that, you'll now notice the deployment is updated here, and it has my information that I just entered here. So it defaults to the first setup or deployment we made. You'll also notice there's a warning here. It says you cannot schedule a deployment because you haven't published anything here. So we normally use this a lot for doing things along the lines of verifying and showing and seeing what's up on Alpha Cloud. But I wanted to use this as a quick way for me to add my deployments into the system. And again, we'll go through, we need to set up our publishing next, but I want to go ahead and let's go ahead and set up our production deployment. So to do so, we click Add Deployment. This brings up our Add Deployment screen. I can go here and say Production. I can pick the website I'd like to use. We've already used dev, so I'm going to use Alpha Sports API. And again, it's going to set up the security for me automatically, so I'm just going to leave that be. Now down below, you're going to see this is going to be our URL name for our production API endpoint. Once we've done that, I click OK. You'll see that it's updated my screen down here where we have our production deployment, our name, etc., and good to go there. So we've set up our application, our website, and our deployments. Now we're ready to actually go ahead and publish our existing solution to Alpha Cloud, and we'll do that in the next lesson. We can go ahead and start publishing now. Let's go ahead and close out of our Alpha Cloud environment. Now we can return to Alpha Cloud, the icon up here, and let's click Alpha Cloud Publish. Now we're in a new project and the publishing parameters are at the project level, meaning that they're not at the workspace level like the Alpha DAO connection strings. They're actually managed at the project level. So what we need to do is go ahead and create our profiles for this particular project. And I like that because then if I have different sub-projects, it doesn't get confusing. I can kind of structure everything very clearly. So to do so, I click Create New Profile and select OK. You notice we don't have any profiles. I'm going to go ahead and click here and type Development. This will be our development deployment. So I'm going to click OK. This will now show us our published settings. So first thing I'm going to verify up top is that we're looking at our application API application. And now we want to go ahead and select the particular deployment we want for this publish. Now, what's nice is, and I'll show you, this actually could be set up on the fly. I tend to like to go in and set everything up ahead of time. But if this were to be deployed for the first time and we haven't deployed it, then I could go ahead and set it up here. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my parameters I want for this deployment. So first thing I want to do is make sure I'm giving it my development deployment structure. I'm going to go ahead and preserve this, not really needed here, but I'm going to go ahead and set up debugging logging. And again, I can pick which server version build, and I'm just going to leave it be for that selection here. And you'll notice here's my web path here. So now that I've done that, I can click OK. This is the first time I publish, so I haven't set up my connection strings for how they will work up on Alpha Cloud. So I can just click here, set Alpha DAO connection strings. Here's my only connection string here. And I'm going to go ahead and edit default value. Basically, that just copies the default value in here. Now, realistically, this will be different because you'll want to use a different set of databases. But for our purposes, I'm keeping the same one. So I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now that I've done that, I can click Close. And I've got my new profile. But we might as well go ahead and set up our other profile while we're here. So let's go ahead and create a new profile and click OK. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my production profile and click OK. Now this will open up our Publish Settings Advanced, similar to what you saw before. First, verify we're working on application API application. Down here, I want to change this from development to production. So I'm going to use that production deployment. And I'm going to go ahead and use complete application logging. I'm going to leave the server version build all OK there. So now that I have everything set up for there, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Again, it's saying, hey, you haven't set up the connection strings for this particular publishing profile. So I'm going to go through the same series of steps. I'm going to click here, then click Edit Default Value, and click OK. And click OK now. Once I've set up my connection string, I can now close this window. So there we go. We've got our two publishing profiles set up and ready to go. And again, I like to do this all up front. Just therefore, everything's set up. I've got it all. I don't have to do anything on the fly. I can just rock and roll in terms of moving forward with my project and deploying it. So we'll actually go through the deployment process next, and we can show you actually operating live in Postman. So let's go ahead and publish. In our case, let's start with the development publishing profile. I'm going to click Development here and click OK. This will show me all the different files. Again, if I don't want to see this, I can click here and it wouldn't show that again. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Zips up everything, and you'll see the first part of it is set up. Now, interesting enough, the thing about Alpha Cloud is you can actually set the default page. So when someone hits your URL, you'll notice in the URL it didn't have a web page denoted. So normally that would be index A5W, but you could actually pick any page you want. I'm going to go ahead and select our API test page. That, again, I probably wouldn't publish that normally, but for our purposes, I'm going to do so. And again, this application doesn't really have a front end per se, so it doesn't make a lot of sense, but your other ones will. And we'll show that in the next round. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK once I've set the default page. You'll notice the first part, it's putting everything together, and it will be moving that up to Alpha Cloud. Now that the first part is done, it will now take the second part, which takes completely. Now that the first part is done, it's starting the second part, which takes place only on Alpha Cloud. So if I wanted to, I could go ahead and close this and I wouldn't need it. Now, very important, you'll see the website link here, and I can copy that link to the keyboard. So we'll be back in a few moments. Now that the deployment is done, you'll see a complete history of the deployment here. And here is our web page. Now that the deployment is done, you'll see a complete history of the deployment here, and you'll see that our application is ready. Now in my case, since we do have an API test page, let's go ahead and make sure that's working. I'm going to go ahead and click on this link here to open up my web browser. So you'll notice I'm at my API test page. This is a page that was automatically created when I created the web service. And you'll see I have my Alpha Sports web service. I'm going to go ahead and click that. This loads up our service endpoint. So you'll see down here are my two items that I have. I have both product select and customer select. So let's go ahead and do product select. I'm going to click here for post. I'm going to scroll down. And you'll notice, by the way, we're already running on the web basically because we have this URL working. So Alpha Cloud's working great. So here I'm just going to go page size is 20 and, oh, I'm sorry, next step. So by the way, we know our Alpha Cloud environment is already running because we're able to actually hit this page and it's operational. So let's give this a test. I'm going to click try it out. I'm going to go ahead and change page size to be 20. And I'm going to change page number to be, let's say 4. And I'm going to scroll here and go execute. And if I scroll down, you'll now see that it executed correctly. It's bringing back my information from my database through Alpha Cloud. Notice also it gives us our curl command, and this is very powerful because this allows other people who may not know Alpha to actually interact with your API, and it gives them the information of how to do so. So now what I'd like to do is go ahead and take this and actually operate it inside of Postman. So first step I'm going to do is open up Postman. So to create this, I'm going to click here. And I'm going to select the ellipsis button and say add request. And I'm going to call this products new. And I'm going to add it to my Alpha505 collection and click save to Alpha505. So you'll notice it's added over here. So now I'm going to click here to open it up. And you'll see right here that I can now start entering my information about this particular endpoint. So the first thing here is the URL we're going to use to actually call my products web service. So to find that out, I can just scroll down here till I get to this curl area right here. And you'll notice it's right here. You'll see that it's HTTPS through product select. So it's a combination of a base URL with my service and the command product_select. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to paste that. And now that's my URL endpoint. Now I need to do two other things. Let's go back and look at this. You're going to notice that this is a post command. So let's go back in here and change this from a get to a post. And now you'll notice I'm posting to this location. Now there's one other thing that needs to be done. When we actually execute this, we have to give the service some information. So back here in our body, we passed in that body information. So I'm going to just go ahead and copy this here. I'm going to go back to Postman. Here in my parameters, I'm going to actually go to body, and I'm going to use raw. There's different ways you can pass it in, but I'm going to pass it in raw. And I'm going to right click here and click paste. So now I have my proper way to call it, my endpoint, and my body that I'm passing in so it will operate correctly. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to go ahead and run it by moving this up. Here's where I should see the results. And I'm going to click send. And there you go. You'll notice now down below, we are seeing the results coming back. And you'll notice it's showing us the information that we saw before running it here, but now within Postman. Now the cool thing about this is whenever I need to use this, I can just go right in here. I don't have to go to a web page or do anything else. I can quickly test and do other kind of things very simply. So I really find Postman is a really powerful product to be able to use this. Now that we've done our development here, we're in pretty good shape. We can go ahead and publish our production one, and then I want to come back in and show you how you can go through the process of using Postman to hit either one you would like. So let's go ahead and deploy our production API and then show you how we can use Postman to test both of them very simply. So I'm going to go back into Alpha. Everything's set up, so we can just go to Alpha Cloud, Publish. This will bring up our publishing profiles. I'm going to select Production and click OK. It's going to show me my list of files, and I'm going to click OK. And I'll be back in a few moments to show you the endpoint of the publishing process and move into Postman. Now that our application is deployed, we can now test our production API endpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and click Copy Link to Clipboard. And I'm going to go back into Postman. Now you'll notice we have our products new here. This is set up with our development endpoint. And first, if I want to do it this way, I can go ahead and click here and I can say duplicate. This will make a new copy of that exact same API call. I'm going to go ahead and edit this and call this production. So I've got my products new, and I'd probably want to call that development and production. Now all I need to do here is modify our URL. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight right here my development URL and put in my production one and make sure it's clean. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Now I haven't changed anything else. I have my body here. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and change this just to show, and I'll click Send. In a moment, you'll see down below, I have my new production API endpoint up and running, and it's returning information correctly. So you see, it's pretty straightforward to go through and set up this environment and be able to set up different ones so I can test them very easily. I can go ahead and publish. The next time I publish, I go right here, I can hit them. Now, this over time may get confusing, especially if you have production, QA, development. So actually Postman has a very neat capability called environments. And we're going to just explore that for a few moments because I think you'll find it very, very valuable. So I'm going to go ahead and close here, and I'm not going to save them, and I'm going to actually delete this. I really don't want that in there. So I've got my one products here. So let's go ahead and close everything up here, and so make sure it's clean. So all I'm looking at is this here. Now you'll notice right here, I have hard-coded in here the development website or development endpoint. But I can go in and use what's called environment variables. So you'll see in the upper right corner, I have a drop-down box, and these are called environments. I've got development and production. I'd set these up earlier for my previous work. So I'm going to go ahead and select development. Now what I want to do is right next to here is a little environment quick look. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. And you're going to see here are my variables. I only have one variable, which is URL. And currently it's pointed to my old test. I did some stuff on my professional services here, and I need to modify that. And you'll notice that I have an initial value for the URL. And again, this is for my development environment. So now that I have my environment, I'm going to go here and I'm going to highlight my URL. And I'm going to put in 2 curly brackets, the name of the parameter I just put in, and 2 curly brackets. So you'll notice it actually highlights it in a different color. What this means is it's going to replace this with what's here. And you'll notice if I hover over it, it's actually showing me that currently I am going to go to this location. So now I can click Send. First thing it does is replace that URL and go from there, and I see the results here. Now what's neat about that is I can go back into Alpha, and you'll notice this is my production, so I'm going to go ahead and copy that, go back into Postman, I'm going to go up here to production, I'm going to click this little I, here's my URL parameter, I'm going to click that, I'm going to delete this parameter right here, or rather the value for this parameter, I'm going to leave the rest the same. I'm going to click Update. I'm going to close this. And I need to double check that. Actually, if you'll notice, I have a little, so you got to be a little careful, but I don't actually need that in part because all I really want is the URL itself. So now that's with there for my production. I'm on my production. So now if I click send, what it's going to do is it's going to substitute that production URL, which is showing here, and click send. Now, this is showing the exact same data because I really don't have a lot of changes between the two. They're the exact same API. But as you can see, that's really powerful. Instead of me having to create like 100 different items here, I can basically create my single set of endpoints and then set up my different environments for, say, development, QA, and production. And therefore, when I want to say, hey, I'm going to run my development tests, I go right here and click send. And so you can see Postman can really make your life a lot easier in terms of managing these endpoints over time. So that wraps up this section in terms of producing API endpoints using Alpha Cloud. As you can see, pretty simple. And later in the course, I'll come back and actually show you how I developed the actual code, etc., for those endpoints, the services. But for now, I'd like to move on to the next section, which is all about security. We are now going to turn our attention on how to manage security with Alpha Cloud, and specifically how you can use what are called security applications to make your life easier when running on Alpha Cloud. Before we do so, I'm going to do a quick return to the application I've built. So we're in the Alpha development environment. You'll notice that we have 3 projects, and the project we're going to focus on for this segment is called security. So I've selected security. And you'll see this has a few more items to it. First, it has a series of A5W pages, for instance, index, home, and a couple sample pages. Index is also our login, where our login component goes. As far as web components, we just have a tabbed UI and a login. If I go into my tabbed UI, you'll see it's fairly straightforward. All you really do is have a tree control with 2 different buttons, one for user and one for administrator. Now, importantly, I've gone ahead and set up security for this. And so let's go ahead and look at the security configuration. So currently I'm using DBF. Normally I use SQL, but I want everything to be in my local environment here. So DBF basically uses DBF files to store that data locally on the development machine. That's very important, this is what I'm using for development. As you can see, we have our login goes to index and our insufficient permissions also goes to index. Now what we'll do is after anybody logs in, we go to home.a5w, and pretty straightforward from there. Now, as far as the users and groups, we've set up 2 different groups, one called administrators, one called users. In terms of our users, I've created 2 users, one administrator at Alpha Sports, this person is an administrator, and user at Alpha Sports is a user there. Pretty straightforward here. So I can go ahead and I publish this locally to my local web root. And if you'll see, it publishes it to a target folder called Alpha505 security. And I've gone ahead and done that. I can check everything out, make sure it's working. So I'll go here. I'll go ahead and log in as administrator. Click login. It accepts my login and we're at the tabbed UI. And you'll see I'm able to see both of these pages because I've set up the security so I can see those. I can see administrator page and user page. Pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to log out and I'm going to go ahead and put in user at Alpha Sports. I'm going to log in and you'll see essentially the same interface, but in my case, since I'm logged in as the user with the user criteria or credentials, I can only see one page, which is called user page. Now, the important thing to realize is that the security system works the same way on the local to IIS there in terms of how you operate within the development environment. So for instance, once I've set those up, I can go to these pages and say, for instance, the administrator page is only it requires a login and only allows to do that. So that's all the normal. What is different is how you move the security data onto Alpha Cloud and then how you can manage it within different deployments. And that's what we're going to focus on for this aspect of the training. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out here. And now we can go ahead and start setting up our new security application on Alpha Cloud and the other elements that are needed to deploy it successfully. So now we're ready to create our publishing profiles and at the same time create our deployments while doing so. So to do so, go to Alpha Cloud and select Publish. This will open our Publish dialog. We don't have any existing ones because remember, we're in a new project here. The other ones have theirs, but in this case, we haven't set one up. So I'm going to click Create New Profile and click OK. So I'm going to create two profiles. I'm going to call one Dev for development. And in this case, that will be the first one we start with. So this will open up our published settings. First thing, and super important, is up here under Applications, make sure you select the target application for this publishing profile and deployment. So I selected Security Application. And you'll notice when it goes here, oh, we don't have any deployments. We have not deployed this application before. So we can now click Add Deployment. So here we'll go ahead and tell it our deployment name, and I'm just going to call it Dev. Next, super important, is we need to tell it which website to use. So in our case, we want Security Application-Dev. Now, we need to focus on this area. We kind of skipped over it before, but now it's very important. So you see under security, there's two storage methods. One is called cloud, the other is called web.config. And I suggest you use cloud, but I want to explain what web.config is that Alpha will take all of your local security data, put it into a file, and put it onto the Alpha Cloud environment with your security data. The problem is it's very limited. It's really for pure testing only. You can't edit that data, and there's a lot of limitations. So I usually use cloud. And you'll notice that it's creating what's called a security application. And this is primary security application dev. And so this is going to be basically a set of data on Alpha Cloud. Think of it as like a little mini database of information. It's actually one single database with separate data, but this is a mini set of data that will take your local data and put it onto the cloud. And that's where the cloud will go for this particular deployment to get its security data, its users and groups, and interface that with all the XBasic and other methodologies there. So you'll notice that automatically, given my deployment name, gave me that there. So I'm going to leave that be, and we'll come back and show you when we do set up production, we're going to actually have a separate application, which is a separate set of data. So that allows you to basically have two sets of security data that you can use up on the cloud. One for testing, one or development, the other for production. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. You'll notice that it updated my deployment here for this particular publishing profile. I'm going to go ahead and leave user and role publication as preserved. Notice when I hover over it, and there's actually different types that you can do. And basically this is telling this publishing profile, what should I do with my local data? Meaning I have a local set of security data. I have a set of data for this particular deployment up on the server. What do you want me to do? And if you just hover over here, it will tell you which one. So here are your options. Preserve is publish only if no users or roles are found. So it's actually going to look up on Alpha Cloud, and if it says there's nothing there, it's going to go ahead and publish our data, which is what we're going to use for our first publishing. The other options you have is ignore. Just don't worry about, we're going to keep them separate. Nothing's going to get touched. Merge will add any new users and groups from your local data up onto the cloud. Replace is powerful. It basically takes all your local data and replaces everything in that security application up on the cloud. So you got to be really careful, because if you're managing data up on the cloud, you could overwrite your security, which would be bad. Now you have merge roles, which all it will do is merge new roles. It won't touch the user stuff. And the last item is replace roles, where it'll replace all the roles. And again, if you're managing roles on your server, you got to be careful in that. So for our first, we're going to use preserve, because then behind the scenes, it's going to say, hey, that's a new set of data up on the cloud. I'm going to go ahead and publish things from there. I'll leave the server version build the same and note my web path here. So I'm going to click OK. It notices that I haven't set up my Alpha DAO connection string for this publishing. I'm going to go ahead and go in, double click on CONN, click Edit Default Value, and click OK, because I basically want to use the same database that I'm using in development on that particular environment. And click OK. This will take us back to our connection strings window. Click Close. So now we have our development profile. Might as well go ahead and set up our production. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'm going to call this prod for production. Click OK. This opens up our published settings. I'm going to select security application. Now, a little different, it's not blank because we already have a deployment. So we could create another publishing profile that goes right to this deployment environment, but I want to have a separate deployment for my production work. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to click Add Deployment. I'm going to call this prod for production. Make sure we're pointing to the right security application website. And notice down here, I have Storage Cloud, and it's creating a new storage security application, which is just a different set of data up on the server for this deployment, which will be managed separately from the previous one. So you'll see it's primary security. Now, if I wanted to, and I wanted to use the same security application as my development, I would just click this drop-down box and select that. So that's kind of a neat feature that you can do. But I definitely want to create them and manage them separately. So I'm going to click OK. This will now upload it. So in terms of this publishing profile, I'm using prod. I'm going to keep it as preserve. Go ahead and just do some complete logging for the production version, and I'll set the server version build the same. So similar to what I did, but the most important thing it did now is that I have now two sources of data up on the cloud for security. So I'm going to click OK. Of course, we're going to set up our connection string for this publishing profile, and I'm going to use the default value again. Click OK and OK. So now that I've got my connection string set up, I'm going to click close, and we've got our publishing profiles ready to go. So I have development for dev. That's going to point to a different website address. It's going to have a different set of security data. I've got production, again, different website address, different set of data there. Now in our next section, we'll go ahead and do a deployment and show you how it all works and talk a little bit more about how do you publish information up to the server for security. With everything set, we can do our first publish. So I'm going to go ahead and select dev. We're going to publish the development first. Going to click OK. It's going to tell me what it's going to do in terms of the files. I'm going to click OK. Now important, you're going to see it's going to actually read my local security data. And if this is in DBF, it's grabbing out my DBF files. If it's in a SQL, then it's grab it there. But it's grabbing that information out of it because we've told it we want to do a preserve, which basically means it's going to collect that data. And if it doesn't exist on Alpha Cloud in our security environment, it's going to move it up there. So now it's going to go ahead. It's moved up everything onto the cloud, including our security data. Now it's running the process of setting up our server, setting up our application, and also moving the data into our environment for security. So we'll be back in a second once that's completed. So it's completed our deployment, and now we're ready to check out our application. So I'm going to go ahead and click here on my website link. This will take us to our development website. And you'll see we are at our Alpha Sports location. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in administrator at alphasports.com, password, and click login. So as you'll see, it's accepted my security data. Now remember, it's not using my local data. It's now using that data up in that security application. And here are my user page and administrator. So everything else works the same. But the important thing for you to realize is that when we published this particular app, it sent up that set of data into that security application, so that information now exists inside that security application. And thus, when this is running on the cloud, it can now gain access to that information of users and groups and other information associated with that. So I'm going to go ahead and log out here and go back to here. And I could do the same thing with user, and it would operate the same as my local environment there. Now, what I'd like to do is go ahead and show you in our next section. Now, I'd like to go ahead and show you, well, what happens if I change my local data? So let's go back into Alpha. I'm back in the development environment. I'm going to go here to Web Security. And I'm going to go here to Users and Groups. So as you can see right now, we have two users, administrator and user at Alpha Sports. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new user. I'm going to call this user new at alphasports.com. I'm going to use the password as the password and click OK. And once I've got user new, I want to actually assign them to users. So I've got a new user here. Now, that user is local. So if I go ahead and publish this locally and run it locally, I'll be able to log in from there. But now what happens when I go to Alpha Cloud? I'm going to want to go back to my development environment. Now remember, we did that first publish, and when we published, it included everything that we didn't have up there. So let's go ahead and go into it and do a publish and see what happens. So I'm going to go to Alpha Cloud, publish. I'm going to select our development, click OK. And again, we're not adjusting anything. We're just going to go ahead and do a pure publish. This is going to compile everything and send it up to the cloud, and we'll see in a few minutes what it does differently. I'll go ahead and come back in a moment. So the system has finished publishing up to the cloud. So let's go ahead and test it out. I'm going to go back here. I haven't really relaunched this, so I'm going to now log in, and I'm going to go user new at alphasports.com and put in password. And you'll notice login information incorrect. So even though I put the information in correctly, let me go ahead and close this and look at our web security again. Again, I've got user new at Alpha Sports, users, and I've set everything up. It's not allowing me to do that. Now, why is that? The reason why is that my local data is different from what's on the server. So when we did our initial publish and deployment, it only included these two new users. So let's go ahead and let's go to Alpha Cloud. Let's go to publish. I'm going to select dev and I want to edit this profile. So now we can adjust our publishing settings and particularly our deployment options. So you'll notice when I've got here, I've got dev. By the way, you can click profiles to get to this same location. I'm going to go here to publishing settings. This shows our current publish settings for development. So again, we're going to security application, we're using the development deployment. Now at this point I can review and say, oh, you know what? For this particular scenario, for user and role, I'm using preserve. And remember, this will only publish, that information if there are no users and roles found. Well, since it found my existing stuff up on the cloud, it ignored that. So what I'd like to do now is merge. Now what merge will do is it will add new users and roles. And that's probably your normal pattern. You probably want that. So if you're doing some development, you add a couple new users and roles, you want those probably up on the server. You probably don't want to do a replace, although you could, it's up to you. Now, if you don't want to add local users, you can say just if I create a new role, merge just the role. So it's up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and click merge. I'm going to click OK. Now with that set, when it goes to publish, it's going to compare my local information to the cloud. And if anything's missing on Alpha Cloud in my security application, and again, only the security application I've specified, it's going to publish that. So I'm going to click OK. Now that I've updated this, I'm going to click OK. And we'll go through the publishing process. And we'll be back in a few minutes when that completes. Now we've completed our publication of our app. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'll now go back in here. So now I'm back here. I'm going to go ahead and put in user new at alphasports.com. And voila. Since we did the merge, it actually added that user up to the cloud. And now what will happen is they can log in. So that's the difference between, say, preserve, which just basically does it the first time, and merge now is going to catch that every time. Now let's do one other quick experiment before we move on. And I want to show a little bit more. I'm going to go back into my web security here. I'm going to go to my users and groups. I'm going to go ahead and delete this user. So I've deleted that user. Now this now is deleted on my local system here. So if I were to log in, it's going to fail locally. But let's go back to Alpha Cloud. Let's log out and let's type in user new at alphasports.com. And you'll see I'm still able to log in. And the reason why is that user still exists up on Alpha Cloud in that security application. So if I need to modify that where I want to make sure any changes to my local security are So if I want to modify that behavior so that any changes to my local security, I click Edit Profile, go to my Publish settings, and here I would say Replace, and now from then on, it's going to basically take an exact mirror of my local information and place it on the cloud, which you may want for development purposes. And this is remembered, so each time you now publish, it's going to use these settings. I tend to use merge unless I want to do a refresh kind of up to the cloud from that standpoint there. Now remember, if you've added in any kind of controls to add users on the cloud, if you do the replace, boom, it's going to overwrite that. That's why I like merge, because you can be adding users on the cloud, you can be adding users locally, and it just merges everything together so that both are valid up on the cloud. Now in this section, I want to show you one other really cool technique about security. First and foremost, what we want to do is go ahead and publish our production environment. Once that's done, we can then show a little neat trick in terms of how we can use the security application database information up on the server. So I'm going to click Cancel. Go here to prod. And now remember, I want to go into publish settings and show you real quick. You'll see that we've set it up for security application. We're using preserve, so it's going to do my initial publish of data, but then from then on, it's not going to use that information, and our current application logging. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to select prod right here, and I'm going to go ahead and do my publish. And back in a few moments. Now that it's completed, I'm going to go ahead and open up our URL for our new production site. You'll notice the URL is a little differently here. I'm going to go ahead and enter administrator at alphasports.com and verify it's working. Now, very important, we're using actually a different set of data for production than development. I want to kind of explore that a little bit more. So let's go back in and let's go back to our Alpha environment. Let's go to our web security, and I'm going to go ahead and go into users groups. I'm going to re-add in our person. So I'm going to go in here and say user new at alphasports.com. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to make them part of the users group. So again, local data. Now what I'm going to do is, now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and publish this. And what I want to do is I'm going to publish it to dev. Now remember, we've set up dev, so when we publish it, it's going to go ahead and update our users on the dev environment. So I'm going to click OK. And we'll let it go through that, and I'll be back in a few moments. So we've finished publishing to our dev. So I'm now going to go back in, and I'm going to go to my development site. I'm going to log out. And I'm going to go ahead and attempt to log in with that new user. And you'll see that it's successful. I'm actually able to log into that new user. Now I'm going to go to my production site. Going to log out, and I'm going to try that same thing here. And you'll notice it doesn't let me log in. And the reason why is when I published, it went to my development security application, not my production one, because the two different deployments use two different data sources. Now, one of the powerful things about it is, let's say you have a situation where you go, you know what, I don't want to manage those. I want them all to look at one data source. So let's go into Alpha. I'm going to go to the Alpha Cloud Publish. I'm going to go to my production. I'm going to go ahead and edit that profile. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Publishing Settings, and this is where we tell what deployment we want to use. So you can see right now we're using production. It's using preserve, although I would probably set that up as merge. Now we can click Manage Deployments. This will open up our deployment, and you'll notice here's a summary. We're application security application, and name is production. And over here you can see, oh, this is how we're storing that storage data. Currently, we're storing it on cloud, and we're doing it to application prod. But if I want, I can select that and say, you know what? I want to now, when I deploy to this deployment, I actually want to point at that other development data source, i.e. the other database of information. So I'll click Apply Changes, and I'm going to close. So it doesn't show up here, but behind the scenes, I'm now basically just doing a pointer saying, hey, when you're running on Alpha Cloud, don't use that production, use there. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and publish this now. And we'll be back in a few moments to show you the impact. Now that we've published that, the only thing that's changed is the setting for security. So let's go back into our web browser. Now here I'm at Security Application Cloud. So this is my production instance. I'm going to go ahead and put in user new at alphasports.com. And I'm going to click login and check it out. I'm actually able to log in because all we really did was point at that other security data source. So it's really up to you. You can have as many of those security data sources as you want on Alpha Cloud. You can manage them separately. Just remember, if you start adding stuff on Alpha Cloud, then you got to be careful about doing replaces or changes, etc. Otherwise, you might impact your security capabilities. So it's really up to you to choose your different ways. And you can see it's a very flexible environment, very flexible system with a lot of control over the security elements. Makes life really easy to work. And again, all the capabilities built into the Alpha security environment work exactly the same on standalone server, IIS, and Alpha Cloud. So all of your XBasic code, etc., is just going to work fine. You just have to set up your deployments and your publishing profiles correctly, and you're good to go. I'd like to cover a really cool new capability that was recently added to Alpha Cloud. That is the ability to use test databases on Alpha Cloud. Now these are for tests, they're not meant for production, but it allows you to quickly create some databases and have some content on your cloud and work from there. It's really a nice little add-on to the Alpha Cloud environment. So to do so, first is obviously make sure you have registered back into Alpha Cloud with your subscription as we have done before. Then go to your Alpha Cloud Advanced Subscription Test Databases and select that. This opens up our managed subscription database servers, and you'll see at this point when you're first starting out, it's empty. So the idea is you need to create a server, and then once you've created a server, then you can create a database. And again, just to reiterate, this is not for production and is supported only for test and other aspects. So this gives you a lot of details if you want to find out more information about how to handle and how to use these kind of databases. So our first step is to go over here to the right and click Actions. And since we don't have any servers yet, we need to first start by creating a server. So I'm going to click here. Now you're given 3 different types of database servers. So depending on your environment, MariaDB, which is MySQL. We also support Postgres and SQL Server. So you want to probably create one that's similar to what you're using now or you're anticipating. I'm going to keep it to MariaDB. And I'm going to click Create. So you'll see now we've created our test server and it's giving my success. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now, very important, you'll see that I have my server. I can actually create other servers. So if I'm supporting multiple database types, but usually you don't need to. So our next step is to go ahead and select that server and go here to Actions. And now I can create a database. So I'm going to go ahead and create a database. So this is going and showing me which server I have. You'll see I don't have any existing database, so I'm going to call this test database. This is just going to be from my here. I go create database. And it's asking me if I want to go ahead and create that. Go ahead and click yes. And we have created it. So I'll go ahead and close this. And now we have our new database that's been created. Now, this is a database. You can go ahead and I'll show you how you can access it through the Alpha system. But one of the nice features, especially if you're just doing development testing and getting used to the environment, is I can actually go to Actions after I've selected the server, and I can say Install Sample Database. And so I can go ahead and say Sample Database. And I'm going to click Install Sample Data. And it's saying I will empty this if it didn't exist. So like my test database, I could have put that in there, but I'm going to go ahead and create sample database. In a few moments, it is now created my sample database with information in there. So I'm going to click close. So I can now do a number of other things here. I can back up, I can restore the database, I can delete this server. There's a lot of other features that allow you to manage these test databases right within the system, which is really, really handy. I'm going to come back and look at those in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, but I want to go ahead and move on to the more important aspect. So as you've noticed, I've gone ahead and created two new databases. One's empty, one's sample. We're going to go ahead and use sample going forward. Now that I have that, I want to start using that within my application. And the reason I did the sample is because I want to have some data to be able to work with. So if you'll notice down here, there's a very important aspect that says Get Connection String. So I'm going to go ahead and select Get Connection String. So once it displays my connection string, you'll notice that it's set all the parameters for me able to have Alpha talk to this database. Now I can just copy this to the clipboard and use it, or I can go ahead and just create a saved named connection string, which is what I want to do here. It makes my life a lot easier. So I'm going to click here. This will open up my creator. I select the database I want, in this case sample database, and it gives a connection name here. Now I could edit that, but I'm going to go ahead and keep this as it is for our purposes of this demonstration. And I'm going to go ahead and click save. Now this says my named connection string has been saved, so I can click OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and close this here. And I'm going to close this here. So at this point, what I've done is I created my server. I went ahead and created a sample database, and then I also created one with data. I went ahead and got my connection string, and now I'm going to click close here. Now what's really neat, if I go to Tools, Alpha DAO Connection Strings, you'll notice that it not only created that saved named connection string, but it put it in my project. So I can immediately start using it. And we'll go ahead and show you a little bit more about how to use this the next lesson. So now we have our new connection string and sample database. We're ready to go ahead and use it. So I'm going to go close. Now before we do so, let's go ahead and look at what's inside that database. And what's nice is we can use a built-in capability of Alpha development environment to do so. So go to Tools, Database Explorer. That's the first item on the Tools menu. You'll notice that it's saying if we have any local tables we can look at, but we can go ahead and click the plus button. This will open up our connection string list. Click MariaDB sample database and click OK. And you'll notice now we have an extension of this particular database to view. So I'm going to click there to explode. And you'll notice that here are the tables and information that the system generated. So when we created that sample database, it created the database, but also put these tables and data in there. And this is the classic Northwinds database environment. So the nice thing is if you're just kind of playing around, you can use the sample database to kind of get started. Really handy from that standpoint here. So let's go ahead and use that and publish it and try it. So I'm going to click close here. I'm now in my application. Now I'm in the security application. I'll go ahead and use that since it's already up and running and ready to go. And I'm going to go ahead and go to Web Components and I'm going to click New. I'm going to select Web Component, the first item, click New, and we'll just make a simple grid and click Next. As always, we have any of the potential templates we could pick, but I'm just going to click OK and use a blank grid. So now we're done. From that point, now we can click Query, and this is all regular Alpha. I can select my sample, click OK. I can click Connect, and I can click Select. This will now open up my browser, so I'll go ahead and click Customers and click OK. Next, I'll go to Fields. I'll select a few items here, and I'll add them in there. And now I can go in and do a quick working preview to make sure it looks okay. So here is my sample database, and this is coming directly from that new database up on Alpha Cloud. Pretty handy. So let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to call this customer_grid. Click Save. Now, since this is the first time I've saved this is another recent feature of Alpha. It says, hey, you know what? You're going to need to set security because security has not been set on this new component. So I'm going to click here, Requires Login. And I'm going to say both administrators and users can see this. So we'll allow them to use both of them. And click OK. Now that I have that, I'm going to go to my tabbed UI. You'll notice we have our existing buttons here. I'm going to go ahead and add a new button here. On the left, I'm going to click Component, and I'll select our customer grid, and I'm going to give it a name, Customer Grid. Okay, and I'll click OK. Now that I have Customer Grid operating, I can do a quick working preview to make sure it looks good. And I can click Customer Grid, and you'll see it opens here. So everything looks good. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go ahead and go to my Web Projects Control panel. So now I have my tools, my Alpha DAO connection string, my sample database in there. So let's go ahead and do a publish. And I'm going to publish to our development site. So I'm going to go to Publish. I'm going to select Development. I'm going to click OK. Now, since we added this new connection string, it's noted that. It says, hey, you know what? You have a new connection string, and the situation is you've set it up so locally it understands what to do, but what do you want me to do when this is deployed under the development deployment? So let's go ahead and cancel this and fix the problem. And the way we do that is we go to Alpha Cloud, Publish, we select our development profile here by clicking on it and click Edit Profile. Then we need to go down here in our Web Projects profile for dev and find Alpha DAO connection string. Going to open that up. And now you'll notice that we have our original connection string and we have our sample database, but it's set to default value. That's why it's triggering that warning message. I'm going to go ahead and select that, click Edit Default Value, and click OK, because we're going to use the same database for our development environment. So I'm going to click OK, and OK. Now that I've adjusted that, I'm going through the regular publishing process. I'm going to click OK. And it's going to start deploying it by moving everything up to the cloud. And I'll be back in a few moments. So now we've deployed our application. Let's go ahead and check it out. I'm going to click here. This will open up our web browser. I'm going to go ahead and log in as I did before. Click Login. And now you'll notice that I now have my new customer grid button here. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And you'll notice that it now is displaying the data in my sample database on the server. So you can see it's really nice to be able to use these sample databases just to put together your initial test information, do some development without having to go through and create a whole bunch of special RDS databases or other things like that. And again, it's really meant for you to kind of quickly start using database information in your application and enjoy those kind of aspects without having to go through a lot of hassle. I will talk next in the next section how you can go ahead and connect to that database using a standard development database development tool so that you can manage the database information without having to be inside Alpha, but it will still use Alpha to help you do that. Now I wanted to go through a quick demonstration of how you can use the built-in features of the Alpha development environment and Alpha Cloud test databases to actually connect and manage your database using an off-the-shelf industry standard management tool. The idea there is you can manage your database, edit, modify, etc. So you can have all those features of capability. And what it very interesting is that we built into Alpha Cloud a way to securely connect to your database. So it's a little different than how you might have done stuff before. So if you follow this procedure, you'll be in good shape. So let's go ahead and go into Alpha. And the first thing we want to do is go ahead and go into Alpha Cloud Advanced Subscription Test Databases. So we've gone ahead and already set up all these databases, but now we need to go in there and show the information. So now I'm going to click on my database server. I'm going to go here to Actions. And you'll notice that the Open SSH tunnel exists. And it's grayed out. So this means that while I'm running the Alpha Cloud environment, or rather the Alpha development environment, it has actually created a secure connection between my local machine and the Alpha Cloud database server. And it needs this secure way because really the databases are within Alpha Cloud, so we need a special way to connect to it. So what we need to do first is go here to SSH tunnel details. And this gives you your connection string information that you'll use in your third-party tool. You'll notice it looks a little differently. We're using localhost, but the reality is it's not sitting on here. We're using a special port that redirects it up to there. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to open my notepad. And I'm going to paste it there for reference. That's all I need to do. Now, very important, realize that I need to have my development environment running for this tunnel to be working. If I close the development environment, that tunnel will close. Now, you can get a third-party tool and have that open all the time, whether or not your development environment is up, but that's beyond the scope of our training today. So let's do the following. Now that I've got my tunnel information, I can go ahead and close this. I'm keeping Alpha Anywhere open. I'm going to go ahead and open up my industry standard tool. In this case, I'm using something called Heidi SQL. It's a free tool that you can download. So you'll notice in here, I've gone ahead and started to set up a session name. Actually, let me go ahead and start from scratch. I'm going to delete that and I'm going to click New. I'm going to call this Alpha Cloud. So you'll see it's asking me, okay, what's the host name, the username, and password? Well, you'll see that we got all that information. So let's go ahead and I'm going to follow along here. My host name is localhost. My username is root. My password's this big long thing here. I'm going to go ahead and paste that there. Now, very important, my port is not 3306. That's the regular way it's set up. We have a very unique port here called 5330. So now that I've entered all that data, I'm just going to go ahead and click Open. This will use that secure shell to go ahead and connect to my database. Now, in this case, it connected correctly, so it's asking me to save this. I'm going to click Yes. And now, there we go. So you'll see, here's Alpha Cloud, and guess what? Here's my sample database. If I click on there to expand it, I now have my different tables. I can click on a table, let's say customers here, and you'll see, here's the definition of my table. So I go in and add new columns. I could then go ahead and show the data within that table. I could write queries. I could do everything I need to do to update, modify, and do the database. Now, the key here, and this is very important, I want to stress again, what Alpha has done is inside our development environment, we actually make that connection to Alpha Cloud through these special information. We set this up. So again, keep Alpha Cloud or keep Alpha Anywhere open, and then everything will be the same. So if you're getting connection errors, you may want to make sure and double check that Alpha Anywhere is up and running. But this is really handy because notice I didn't have to go find a database. I could do everything pretty much so within Alpha Cloud and within the Alpha development environment, and then use this powerful tool to go ahead and manage that database from there. So that's Alpha Cloud test databases. Feel free to use them. Don't use them in production just because there's a lot of criteria in terms of that. And I think you'll really enjoy using that for your development purposes. I wanted to take a few minutes to walk through a very powerful capability built into Alpha Cloud called properties. Properties are very handy, especially if you start doing more complex multi-client implementations. So let's go ahead and do the following. I've already kind of set everything up here, so I'll walk you through what I did here. But first thing I want to do is go to Alpha Cloud, and I'm going to go to my applications. So I'm in my applications area, and I'm going to go here to the security application. That's where I made all of my modifications. And you'll see down below you have Manage Authorized Maintainers. This is where you can allow other people to be able to manage and update your application. But another one here is called Manage Properties. And let's go ahead and click on that. Now this is Manage Properties. Properties are specific elements that are associated with a application, not a deployment, but an application. So this is sort of the high level. I've got a set of properties, and there's different types of properties. First and foremost, there's things like Alpha DAO connection strings, storage connection strings, etc. These are normally the things you set in your publishing profile to say redirect to a different database or area for storage that you would do on your local machine. But also you have something here called application constant. So what I did is for my application security, I put in two of them, one called company name and logo URL. So these are constants that are associated with this application. And you'll notice I just threw in some dummy values to start out with here. These are sort of defaulted values. I'd probably put a little better default ones, but for now I left that there. Now what you can do is when you go and create deployments, you can modify those properties when you deploy that application to that specific deployment. So let's go ahead and close this. I'm going to go to Alpha Cloud and I'm going to go to Advanced Deployments. Now I'm going to go ahead and select my security application. Now I've gone ahead and already created a couple extra deployments. So we were using development, etc., but I created two deployments that are specific called Customer A and Customer B. So let's look at Customer A. So it's going to go to a specific website called Customer A. Here is and I'm using its own security, etc. So the idea is this deployment is going to be associated with a specific customer. We're going to deploy the same application to both Customer A and Customer B, but when I deploy it, I want to have these different modifications so they operate a little differently. So what I'm going to do is on Customer A here, I'm going to go down here to Manage Properties. Again, this is different. Before we were managing it at the application level, that's sort of the top level. Now I'm going to manage the properties for this specific deployment. So I'll go ahead and open that up. So as you can see, I took my application constant of company name and logo URL, and I actually put in unique values. So company name is company A, and the logo URL is a URL that's up on my S3 bucket for a logo. Now I could recite that to the application value, meaning the default value, but I've done that for here. Now I'm also going to go here to the Alpha DAO connection strings. And you'll see I've actually put in a specific connection string for the test database online. So in my regular, I use a single database for my development, but now I have a separate database for each one. So let me go ahead and show you that just so you see the background. I'm going back into my environment here, and you'll notice that I created two different test databases before, one called Customer A and Customer B. We were using this sample database before. And what I did is I edited some of the data in each of these databases just so we can see the effect of what's going on here. So in our deployment, basically I'm saying for this particular deployment, Customer A, I'm going to set those constant values, and I'm also going to set my connection string to go to this database here. So you'll see I've actually specifically said go to the database Customer A. Now I can go here to Customer B and my deployments. And you're going to see when I go to first Manage Properties, now I have different constants for this particular deployment. So we're associating these for company B and for a different look or URL. And then also same thing for connection string. For this deployment here, I've set up a different database pointing it to that Customer B database. So what are the impacts? The idea is when I publish now, I just simply tell it which deployment, and therefore on the server, it's the exact same code that was on my development machine, but it can work a little differently with these Customer B and Customer A. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and go to Customer A, and let's look at that real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and we'll jump in and show you what it looks like. So my login's the same. I'm going to go ahead and log in as the administrator. And so I'm in here, and now I'm going to go to the Alpha Cloud Properties page, and you'll see that, it's showing Company A and my logo for Company A, just a fake logo here. And you'll notice that this is my Company A website. So let's go ahead and go here, and I'm going to change this to Customer B. This is my website for Customer B. We'll go ahead and log in there. So exact same website, same code, but now when I go to the properties, it shows Company B here and logo B. So the intent is I can make these nice little modifications, and therefore I don't have to complicate my code. Now, how did I do this? Let's go back into Alpha. I'm going to go ahead and close this here, and I'm going to open up this Alpha Cloud Properties page. And you'll see it's a pretty simple page. Basically, it has just some script. And what I do is I find and grab that constant. So there's a built-in function here called getConstant. This is built into it. And this will look at the constant that's set for the deployment that's running at that time. So in this case, I'm looking up the company name and spitting that out. And then I'm also getting the logo and putting it in an image tag so it shows there. So what happens is when this page runs on the server, depending which deployment I use, it picks up the different company name or logo URL. So now I don't have to worry about when I have a new company come up, I don't have to make any changes to my database or anything. I just have to go on to Alpha Cloud, create a new deployment, add those elements there. Now, as we mentioned, one of the cool things, and I'll go back here, is I'm going to go back to customer A, and I'm going to open up our customer grid. This goes against the customer table in my database. And you'll notice when I open this up that you'll see it's showing a specific set of data. It's identical to what we had, but I went ahead and edited the values in the database. So in our customer A database, I've got a little -A or equals A after each of these. I'm going to go over to my company B, and I go to customer grid. And since this is pointed to a different database connection string, you'll see now it's showing -B, but all the code's the same. So this gives you a lot of power to be able to set up publishing profiles, or rather deployment profiles, for different variations of your product, but you keep the core code and the core product the same. And it's very straightforward. You set up your parameters or the properties at the application level, and then when you set up a deployment, you go in and set those up on the fly as you create those deployments. And if I never needed to change any of this, I could easily just go into the deployment and change it. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that. It's kind of fun. So you'll see we're company A, and this is for company A. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to my Alpha Cloud, and I'm going to go to my deployments. So first I'm going to select my application here, and then there's my deployment here, and I'm going to go ahead and click Manage Properties in here. So I'm just going to go change this to A, B, C, and I'm going to tab out and apply those changes. So basically I've now, for this deployment, modified one of the parameters here. Now this hasn't been deployed yet, so we'll do now is I'm going to go ahead and add this to schedule. So basically I'm going to redeploy the exact existing website / application, but now when it redeploys it, it's going to use that new text. So I'm going to go add to schedule. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and go apply changes. It's going to be essentially immediate. It's not scheduled in the future, so it'll take a moment. And now behind the scenes, Alpha is taking that deployment, getting the new parameters and redeploying it for me. So let's go to our web browser. So you'll notice this is what our original property was, company A. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. And let's see if it's deployed it yet. Not yet. It takes a few moments. So we'll wait for a moment until it's fully deployed on the website, and then we can refresh. I'm back after about 30 seconds or so waiting for it. I reopen the cloud properties and check it out. It has my new property here on there. And you'll notice I didn't have to change my code or do anything with my publishing profile. I could literally go into my deployments and change it. Now, the important thing to realize is that from now on, anytime I do a new deployment using that deployment, these are the values that are going to be used. So it's kind of sticky. It's nice. It'll just stay that way. You don't have to worry about making adjustments from there. So properties are really nice features that allow you a lot of flexibility, especially if you have a situation where you are deploying to multiple people and you want to have the same application but have it operate a little differently. And there are a lot of other little elements you can use with properties in your application just to make your life a lot easier. So normally in these kind of scenarios, you use the publish parameters to set up publishing profiles for each customer. But one of the most powerful things about Alpha Cloud is the ability to have a single publishing profile. So the idea behind this is that you create one publishing profile that publishes to your development environment. This is kind of your test environment on there. And then you don't need these other profiles, because I'll show you in a few moments how we can leverage the power of Alpha Cloud to manage that for us. So I'm going to take this solution. And again, remember, this solution is basically the same except for the parameters on the deployments. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this to my development environment. It's going to go through, compile my changes, etc. And now it's deploying it to the cloud. I'll be back in a moment when it's completed. So it's completed. And you'll notice it's published to our security application. And this is our development environment. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And I'll go to Alpha Cloud Properties. And remember, I had just those junk test items there. They weren't real, but it was the parameters or properties for that. So I can go ahead and test, make sure everything works great, the functionality is there. And now I'm going to go ahead and promote this into production. And I actually want to promote it into two separate areas for two customers. Now you'd think I'd go back to the publish, set up a publishing for each of those, but that's not necessary. So let me go ahead and walk you through. I'm going to go to Alpha Cloud and go to deployments. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select security application, and I'm going to look at my dev deployment environment. Okay. And you'll notice that I'm on version 14 of the application. So this is the 14th time I've published to this environment here. So first thing I want to do is I want to go to my customer A. And just to make sure this shows it works, I'm going to go ahead and do manage properties. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to company A-test. And I'm going to apply that. Okay. So I'm going to close that. And you know what? Let's go to customer B here. And we'll manage the properties. And I'm going to change this test just to show you that this is working properly. Now remember, we had company ABC and company B. And in fact, if I go ahead and close this and reopen it, we haven't published it, so it's all the same for both of those. Now, instead of publishing, I'm actually going to go in here. I'm going to go to customer A, and we're with our security application. I'm going to go add to schedule. Now, notice that it added a new line. So first, it's going to tell me when it is going to be starting, and I'm going to just have that immediate, and then when it stops, which is forever. But notice here, this is super important. You'll notice the current one running on there is application version 13. But since we deployed a new application to our development environment, we actually have a new one here called 14. So I actually wanted to go ahead and use that new application, that new version of mine. So I'm going to go ahead and click Apply Changes. And in a moment, you'll see that it's set and it's ready to go. I'm going to go to Customer B. And I'm going to go ahead and add to schedule like I did before. I want version 14. And I'm going to go Apply Changes. So at this point, I've taken my development version, my latest and greatest version, and gone ahead and told Alpha Cloud, go ahead and deploy it to these other two deployments, my customer A and customer B. And during that process, it's going to actually update and add those parameters into it so that they're a little differently. So we can pop back into the browser and go ahead and look at it, and you'll see the new versions are in both locations, and more importantly, it's also updated the properties that we adjusted there. So we'll know we have a new version of it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my browser environment. And I'm going to give it a few more moments, and then I'll be back in a moment just to allow time for Alpha Cloud to deploy it to the target deployments. So now I'm back to my browser with customer A. I'm going to go ahead and log in. And I'm going to check my Alpha Cloud properties, and you'll see the new properties have been applied. And more importantly, any changes I made to my application in dev got copied over into my deployment. So now we can go to log in here. We'll go to Alpha Cloud Properties, and you'll see, again, this deployed with the updated properties. So the powerful thing is now you don't have to create multiple publishing parameters for your different environments. You know, I'm using customer A and B, but this could be dev, QA, and production. So you always publish to dev, and then when you want, you can then move that to production or to test or to whatever. And during that process, two things will happen. One, it's going to take whatever version is on Alpha Cloud and move it into that particular environment with the website, etc. And if you have made property changes, those will be applied at the same time. So this can have a significant element of simplifying your life because now you don't have to manage a whole bunch of different publishing profiles and do other things like that. Pretty simple. And actually behind the scenes, there's a full API structure that can even allow you to automate that second step of actually deploying it from dev into your different environments you want it to go to. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do, and therefore you can have very powerful development and deployment processes to support your overall efforts. And don't forget, you can always use the rollback feature to say, uh-oh, I put something out in customer A or B. You can actually go back into the environment and roll it back to a previous version. So you can note down what version you're on in terms of those numeric values and dates that are gone. And that way you can really track it and make it easy for you to move forward and move back efficiently. Thank you so much for taking the Alpha505 Alpha Anywhere Alpha Cloud Masterclass. You learned how to set up and leverage the Alpha Cloud environment to take your Alpha Anywhere development process to the next level. The key topics we covered were setting up and deploying your Alpha Anywhere applications into Alpha Cloud. Alpha Cloud's unique features and capabilities that give you industrial strength deployment capabilities. Using the built-in rollback system, setting up scheduled deployments for automatic deployment. Setting up dev, QA, and production deployments to help automate your deployment process through every step of your application's lifecycle. Managing security for your applications, using the built-in test databases and leveraging third-party tools to manage those databases. You also learned how to use Alpha Cloud application settings to handle common multi-site application development situations. Your next step in your giant killer training is to dive into how to actually use Alpha Anywhere to quickly develop your applications with little or no code. Check out our comprehensive training series that will help you quickly master Alpha Anywhere and all the powerful features that are built into the development system.